order. Clerk, call the roll.
Chair Lozano.
Here.
Vice Chair Gates.
Here.
Bernal.
Here.
Cortez. Cunningham. Gonzalez. Hayes.
Here.
Rometto. Tepper.
Here. Thank you, members. Quorum is present. Thank you for all in attendance today. Today we have 12 bills that we will hear, and we should be able to get through them relatively quickly, I believe. So we will begin with House Bill 2455. Chair calls Chairman King, and the chair lays out House Bill 2455 and recognizes Chairman King, sorry about that, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Chairman Lozano and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I'm here to lay out House Bill 2455. It's a firefighter bill. Firefighters suffer from many work-related illnesses that are covered under workers' compensation under the Presumptive Act or Chapter 607 of the Government Code. This means that these illnesses are presumed to have been caused by their duty and they don't have to show cause. Unfortunately, many of these diseases are caught at late stages, are incredibly expensive to treat, and can often lead to death. This is especially evident in the case of cancer. Firefighters suffer a higher rate of cancer and death by cancer than the general population. The Presumptive Act covers 11 different cancers that most commonly occur in firefighters, and a workers' compensation provider can be on the hook for hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars for treatments. In addition to cancer, the Act also covers cardiovascular events. If a firefighter has a heart attack or stroke while on duty, they are generally covered. These events can also lead to extremely costly treatment that is covered by the provider. With many of our fire departments in risk pools or self-insured, this cost is assumed by the department and can cause long-term damage on a city or an ESD's budget. So, House Bill 2455 would allow a firefighter to obtain an annual screening for cancer, cardiovascular issues, and infectious diseases. The bill uses the National Fire Protection Association standards as a baseline for these examinations and directs the Texas Commission on Fire Protection to draft rules on its implementation. Catching one cancer case early or identifying a cardiovascular problem that is easily repaired and prevents a heart attack will not only save a firefighter's life, but will also save money. I appreciate your attention and would be glad to answer any questions and reserve the right to close.
Members, any questions? Thank you, Chairman King. We'll let you close. Chair calls John Riddle. Thank you for being here, Mr. Riddle. If you could just start with your name, the organization you represent, and your position on the bill.
I'm John Riddle, and I'm with the Texas State Association of Firefighters, and I'm here in support of HB 2455. I don't want to repeat everything that Chairman King just said, but I will say that as he laid out, firefighters do suffer from many work-related illnesses, with cancer, cardiovascular, and stroke topping that list. Cancer today is the #1 cause of firefighter deaths around the country. This bill, I believe, gives us the ability to catch these diseases in their early stages, which will save firefighter lives. And as Chairman King stated, catching these diseases in their early stages will ultimately save taxpayer dollars long term. So with that, I would just say thank you for your time today, and I respectfully ask for the committee's support on HB 2455. Thank you, and I can answer any questions if you have.
Thank you, Mr. Riddle. Members, any questions? No, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Chair calls Bill Kelly. Thank you for being here, sir. Just start off with your name, the organization you represent, and your position on the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Bill Kelly. I'm the Director of Government Relations for Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner, here to testify on the bill. Admittedly, I'm not the subject matter expert on this. I have a piece of written testimony from our fire chief, Chief Pena in Houston. We absolutely support the initiative by Representative King. Only question I believe that Chief Pena had was the rulemaking authority, leaving that with the Texas Commission on Fire Protection that does not have a physician on its board. We have a program that we have instituted to be able to provide these screenings that is absolutely the intent that Representative King has. And so he just wanted to be able to express what Houston was doing as far as our department on these different evaluations with it. So we shared that information with Representative King's office. Very much look forward to working with him. Do not in any way want to be against. We just wanted to be able to express Houston's concern on this particular way that it was set up with regards to the screening. So,
Okay. Members, any questions? No questions. Thank you so much.
thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on, for, or against House Bill 2455? Hearing none, the chair recognizes Representative King to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members, Mr. Vice Chairman Gates. Our firefighters are some of our most important resources in our communities throughout the state of Texas, and it's a very dangerous job, and we should do everything we can to help them stay safe and do their job and go home to their families. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions. If not, I close.
Members, any questions? No questions, Chairman King. Thank you, sir. With that, the chair withdraws House Bill 2455 and leaves it pending at this time. Let the record show that Representative Romero is now present.
You have a script of it. If you want to go to Turner's.
Yeah. The chair lays out House Bill 2371 and recognizes Representative Turner. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair Gates, members of the committee. Thank you for hearing this bill today. House Bill 2371 is a local bill. It would amend the Health and Safety Code to allow a municipality that has taken possession and control of a cemetery for at least 25 years to sell additional burial space in that cemetery. So the story on this is that in 1995, the City of Arlington, which I represent, used procedures that are already laid out in the Health and Safety Code to take possession and control of the historic Arlington Cemetery. The Arlington Cemetery occupies a tract of approximately 10 acres. It was established in 1872. Many early Arlington settlers are buried there, with the oldest documented burial being in 1875. So this cemetery has been in use for 120 years and is the burial site for many Arlington citizens. But the last burial in the cemetery was in 1998. The Health and Safety Code, as written, only allows for burial of related individuals in family plots. So that's a section of a cemetery that was purchased and enclosed or reserved for a family of individuals. And so this provision, a limitation, precludes many current residents who were born and raised in Arlington and have called Arlington home for their entire lives in many cases from being buried in this historic city cemetery. So House Bill 2371 would simply allow the city to take steps towards selling additional plots and continue serving the community. And we do have a witness here from the city attorney's office in the city of Arlington who can answer more specific questions. But I'd be happy to answer any of the committee's questions if I can.
Great. Members, any questions? No questions, sir. We'll let you reserve the right to close.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Chair calls Kenneth Bennett. Hello, sir. Thank you for being here. Just start
Good
off-
afternoon,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name's Ken Bennett. I'm a deputy city attorney for the city of Arlington, here to speak on behalf, and I'm pleased to speak on behalf of the city of Arlington in favor of this bill, House Bill 2371. Why are we in favor of this bill? As has been, you've heard, Arlington Cemetery is a historic cemetery of about 10 acres in central Arlington. It dates back about 150 years. Through most of that history, it was overseen and managed by a private organization, cemetery association, and then later just by charitable individuals, public-spirited people who stepped up to kind of take control and look after it. In 1995, as you've heard, Arlington used the current statute to take control of the cemetery on behalf of the public. It provides that the city can do that if it finds there's a possible threat to the public health or welfare. Since that time, the city has maintained the cemetery. Our Parks Department maintains the landscaping. But the statute, as you've heard, the statute says that additional burial spaces we can't sell. What Arlington desires to do is to improve and develop the cemetery as a better public amenity that would be open to burials of other members of the public, other than perhaps, as you've heard, people who already have family members there. We want to do that. We think we could do that to allow the public to make use of this amenity without damaging the historic character of the cemetery. We don't see it as a significant source of any kind of revenue. That's not why we're doing it. But any revenue that is made would simply be turned back into the cemetery and used for the upkeep and maintenance of the grounds. This bill, as you've heard, would amend the current statute to allow a city that's been in possession under the statute of a cemetery for at least 25 years to use a procedure there to make certain findings and so that burial spots could then be sold to members of the public. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Members, any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Representative Tepper.
So this just relates to Arlington Cemetery, or would it affect statewide, the cemetery?
It's a statewide bill. It's just that it's set up to where it limits it to cities that have been in possession of a cemetery under the statute for in excess of 25 years.
Are there any unintended consequences around the state, do you think, or do you think this will help other cemeteries, honestly, throughout the state?
I think that time period of 25 years, I think we wouldn't want a situation where, a city was opportunistic and wanted to take over a cemetery and make a money-making thing out of it, and that's not what this is for. We think that there's not going to be very many cities, probably. And I think that with that time limit like that, that's going to, that would discourage people just trying to turn some money on something.
Okay, because I'm just concerned that if someone bought a plot at 45 years of age, maybe you lost their address or they moved, that if they pass later, we wouldn't have known that it was their lot. Is that?
Well, there's a procedure that's in the bill to where before we can, any lot can be declared abandoned or sold, then there would be an opportunity for people to come back and rebut a presumption of abandonment and show by some evidence, could be testimony, doesn't say what, but documentation, if they got a deed or, anyway, they would have an opportunity to say, no, wait a minute, not so fast. We believe we own that plot. So there's an opportunity to do that.
Because these plots are a real estate transaction. Are they filed at the county, or who has the record of that?
There are very few records, formal records of the cemetery, and part of what Arlington wants to do is replat so that any lots sold would be, that'd be filed with the clerk's office, and any lots sold.
The county clerk's office?
Yeah, the county clerk's office, and I think that's typically how cemeteries operate now is you would buy a lot with reference to that plat. Of course, even before that, we're going to have to do a archaeological type of a study to make sure, because there may be a lot of unmarked graves. We don't know right now, but we want to avoid any problems there. So we'll need to do some. We're a long way from just jumping ahead and starting it. This is kind of the first step.
Okay, thank you.
Members, any more questions? No? Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Thank you.
Okay. Let the record reflect that Representative Cortez is now present. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on for or against House Bill 2371? Hearing none, the chair recognizes Representative Turner to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Just to try to also address Representative Tepper's questions. This could potentially impact other cities, but only in the sense that it would allow them to do this if they met the other criteria in the bill. There's certainly no requirement to do it, so it would very much remain a local decision. We do know of some other cities that own cemeteries. City of Galveston does. City of Austin owns at least one. So I think it varies throughout the state, but again, it's simply permissive. And there is a pretty detailed process spelled out in the bill with respect to public notice that the city would be required to give, and then the defining abandoned plots if the city has no record of ownership, but the person can rebut that by submitting evidence after the city has publicized its intent to sell that plot. So I think we've got some pretty good safeguards in the measure to address those concerns. And if there's no other questions, appreciate the committee's favorable consideration and would appreciate if you choose to send it to the local and consent calendar.
Okay. You got it, Representative.
And with that, I close.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The chair will withdraw House Bill 2371 and leave it pending at this time.
There's no witnesses.
Okay, the chair lays out House Bill 2131 and recognizes Chairman Raymond to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members. Members, this bill would provide a $20 billion property tax cut and lower sales taxes by 2 cents in the state of Texas.
Awesome.
I'm sorry, it's the wrong bill.
Oh, it's okay.
Now that I have your attention. Thank you, Chairman and members. Members, currently the City of Laredo does not receive state funding for homeless individuals and families, emergency shelters, nor for providing essential services to shelter residents. In 2022, a point-in-time count estimated a total of 348 residents experiencing homelessness in Laredo. Simply put, House Bill 2131 allows for more cities to qualify for homeless housing and services programs through the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, changing the population requirement from 285,000 and above to 200. Right now it's 285,000 or more to 250,000 or more. Members, this bill would not only benefit the homeless in Laredo, but two of your other favorite cities, Irving and Lubbock, would also benefit from this. By reducing population requirements, cities would have the necessary tools to address homelessness issues before they worsen. Members, there's no fiscal note to this bill, so I would appreciate your support, and any questions, I'm here to try to answer them.
Members, any questions? No questions.
Thank you.
We'll let you.
Yeah, Mr. Tepper asked me to do the bill for him because he said I had more seniority, and
There's no witnesses.
Okay. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on for or against House Bill 2131? Hearing none, the chair recognizes Representative Raymond to close.
Thank you, Chairman and members. Seriously, you all know homelessness is it's an issue that I think all of us want to do more about, and so my city is, being a border city, we deal with this, and it's getting worse, not better. So this small change will help us help some more folks. We have a lot of folks from the private sector who donate to help, but we've got some state money, and we just want to give Lubbock, Irving, and Laredo a chance to maybe get some of that. With that, I close.
Thank you, Chairman. With that, Chair withdraws House Bill 2131 and leaves it pending at this time.
Thank you. Thank you,
Chair.
members.
Just voted out today, right, Chair? So just voted out today?
Tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Does he have to?
Yes.
Does he have
Yes, deal with it.
Okay. The Chair lays out House Bill 2402 and recognizes Chairman Moody to explain the bill.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. House Bill 2402 is about what's known as the at-risk set-aside, which is something that you're probably familiar with and something that's going to come before this committee a number of times. It's a pool of tax credits that the Department of Housing and Community Affairs has allocated for rehabilitating or even rebuilding aging housing developments that are primarily managed by housing authorities and nonprofits. There are numerous multifamily housing projects in need of these kinds of repairs and updates. And what House Bill 2402 does is expand the types that are eligible to receive it. The bill changes the definition of at-risk to include 2 federal housing programs operated by public housing authorities, those being Section 8 new construction and Section 8 substantial rehabilitation. There are hundreds of these in the state of Texas, and many would greatly benefit from updates through this funding opportunity. This is about revitalizing neighborhoods and improving living conditions for some of our lowest income Texans. This is a bill that I've worked on with our housing authority in El Paso. I could venture to answer any questions that y'all have, but I have brought the expert that I work with in El Paso to answer any questions with us, and he's registered to testify as a witness to be able to dig into the details if need be.
Okay. Members, any questions? Thank you,
Thank you
Chairman.
so much.
We'll let you reserve the right to close. Chair calls Gerald, is it, how do I say your last name, sir? I don't want to.
Cishon.
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 Mr. Cishon, thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Committee. Jerry Cishon, CEO of the Housing Authority for the City of El Paso, speaking in favor of House Bill 2402. I'd like to let you know that the Section 8 new construction was a type of construction that was done in the late 70s to early 80s. The units are actually quite old now, 40 years worth. They do receive federal assistance for very low income housing families. And they're, at least in El Paso, the over 500 units that we have are at risk of no longer receiving that subsidy because we just can't maintain the units. They're just really, really being run down. So what we'd like to do is be able to be in the at-risk set-aside in order to compete in the state of Texas in order to receive tax credit dollars to rebuild these if they are successful within that competition. This does not change any of the budget authority over to TDHCA. This is just allowing us to be able to compete in the at-risk set-aside.
Okay. Members, any questions? No questions. Thank you so much, Mr. Cishon. Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on for or against House Bill 2402? Hearing none, the chair recognizes Chairman Moody to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I close. If there's no other questions.
Members, any questions? No questions. Okay, with that, the chair withdraws House Bill 2402 and leaves it pending at this time.
I think if you go in front.
Chair lays out House Bill 2625 and recognizes Chairman Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. This is a bill that is very narrowly tailored to our housing authority back in El Paso. It's spent the last decade transforming a portfolio of aging public housing into modern, fully remodeled, affordable housing. That was largely done through what's known as Rental Assistance Demonstration, or RAD, which allowed owners of these housing projects the opportunity to enter into long-term contracts that included financing of improvements. On the operational side of things, RAD diversified our housing authority's portfolio and greatly increased its assets and liquidity. It now oversees more than 7,000 units, and that's put it in position of needing to protect and preserve those assets in the future. House Bill 2625 does that by allowing it to create an asset commission with fiduciary responsibility and high-level long-term oversight. The commission would be a 5-member body of people qualified through relevant expertise in real estate finance and multifamily housing, and it would be tasked with reviewing any major sale or transfer of the housing authority's assets. As with my other bill, while I'm happy to attempt to answer any questions, have an expert Mr. Seshan, who can answer any of the questions about why we need this and the conversations they've had with our local governmental entities about creating this oversight. This is a transition period, but we do need legislative authorization to do it, but it is specifically tailored to El Paso.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Members, any questions? Okay. Chair recognizes Mr. Seshan.
Thank you, Chairman, Committee. Jerry Seshan again, CEO of the Housing Authority for the City of El Paso. So the Housing Authority for the City of El Paso has gone through a massive transformation in that we fixed every single unit that we had in El Paso. So 7,000 units have been completely rebuilt and have now a 40-year lifespan. The change is that when you have public housing, there's a declaration of trust that's held by the federal government. Anything you try to do, which is financial, is run through the SAC Commission that evaluates it financially on whether it's the best interest for the citizens of El Paso. With the RAD transformation, SAC is no longer part of that analysis. So we've lost the oversight that we would normally receive from the federal government. Based upon the significance of the asset and the limited scope oftentimes of boards, what we're looking for is a highly qualified board of experts in real estate and finance to sit over top these assets to make sure that if there's any refinancing, recapitalization, or any sale of the asset, that is done for the best interest of the people of El Paso.
Great.
Additionally, there's no fiscal implication to the state of Texas.
Yes, sir. Members, any questions? Yes, Representative Hayes.
Could you educate us with a little more clarity on exactly what this commission is going to do?
So what it's going to do is it's going to sit over top the assets. So if you think of like an endowment for the university, a lot of times you have a different committee that sits over top the assets. That's what's going to happen here. The Housing Authority day-to-day operation is going to be run by the same committee that's appointed by the mayor. The difference is that the assets themselves will be transferred under this commission, and the assets will be held in trust to make sure that if there's any type of recapitalization, refinancing, or sale, that is done prudently and efficiently. So the fear is that if you get a board that, I guess, wants to sell off assets, they could do so. We would not like that to happen. We want additional oversight to protect the asset that we lost when we transferred this through the RAD transformation.
And the actual appointment of those members will be under what format?
It'll be done by the current committee that oversees the Housing Authority.
Okay, so the Housing Authority will appoint the members of the Asset Commission.
That is correct.
So why not just have the Housing Authority do this? Why do we need the Asset Commission?
Because the board of the Housing Authority, they're not experts in finance. They're not experts in real estate. I have a CEO of a hospital. I have a civil engineer. I have an educator. What they are, they're not experts in complicated finance. Now, they've helped me get to this point. What I can't say is I don't know if there's going to be experts in the future who sit on the board. I know when I got there, there was a public corruption scandal that occurred in El Paso. There were distribution of assets of the Housing Authority that were not done in the best interest of the people of El Paso. So what we'd like to do is make sure that we have that secured and the protection is done by having experts sit on top of the assets themselves.
Thank you.
Yep.
Members, any more questions? No questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to testify on for or against House Bill 2625? Hearing none, the chair recognizes Chairman Moody to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Hayes, for not asking me those questions. I sincerely appreciate it. But basically, we had oversight when the assets were held in one form. We don't want to lose that. And so even though this was an amazing transition for the Housing Authority to undertake, really great for the residents that live in these facilities, it's been hugely impactful in our community and helping folks have a better quality of life that are residents here. And so we don't want to, in making that amazing transition, then not have the oversight going forward. So this is the fix that we constructed, only impacts El Paso. It is truly a local bill. And so happy to answer questions about any of those. And if we want to talk about how that'll work going forward, I'm happy to answer those questions and dig into those details with anyone on the committee. If there's no other questions, I'll close at this time.
Okay, Chairman. Members, any questions? No questions. Thank you, Chairman.
All right. Thank you, sir.
With that,
May I be excused?
yes, sir.
Thank you.
With that, the chair withdraws House Bill 2625 and leaves it pending at this time. The chair lays out House Bill 3245 and recognizes Representative Manuel to explain the bill.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. There was a rumor going around that this is my first layout, and that's true. Currently, the Texas Local Government Code allows for vendors whose principal place of business resides within a municipality that is selling products to the municipality to utilize 5% preference for purchases of less than $500,000. The issue is that this caps businesses who perform construction services to less than $100,000. The code is currently written in the manner that discriminate against contracts for construction services companies that sell products and provide labor as compared to the businesses that only sell the products. This also limits municipalities from gaining local tax benefits on construction services for purchases less than $500,000. What HB 3245 will do will raise the limit of 5% local preferences for construction services from $100,000 to $500,000 to match the current limit for material and equipment purchases for municipalities. It will also provide a change to the code that would equal the amount for construction services to less than $500,000 to match contracts for other purchases. HB 3245 will be beneficial for many rural areas across the state because it would allow for more tax dollars to stay in the local municipality and help greater numbers, especially when we're going through times of inflation. We always want to make sure that we're keeping as many of our local dollars in our local areas as much as possible. What this bill will not do, is what HB 3245 will not do, is it is not going to give local governments the authority to just kind of wield and bend and do anything nefarious with contracts. It's just going to level out the playing field. It's a great solution for smaller towns, for rural Texans to be able to live and work in the same place and not have to travel multiple places. It still keeps things competitive. This is not saying that you have to give the contract straight to the local person. It's just giving an incentive to make sure that we're keeping those dollars here and making sure that we're remembering the people who we live next to. So I thank you all for listening to me. Thank you for being my first, and I will reserve the right to close. And if you have any questions, I have people far more intelligent about this than I am, but I reserve the right to close.
Members, any questions? Thank you. We'll let you reserve the right to close, Representative. Chair calls Jeremy Pavlich. Thank you for being here, sir. If you could start with your name, if you represent yourself, and your position on the bill.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Jeremy Pavlich, representing myself. I'm a master plumber from Southeast Texas, and I am for this bill. Y'all got a lot of work ahead of y'all. I'll try to keep this really brief. As a master plumber, somebody who likes to do work in town and for the municipalities when we do get the work, this does help us out a little bit. For me, I think it's just kind of updating this bill. I think that's what this is doing. We're not really changing too much, just kind of bringing it up with the time. So hopefully y'all can get behind and support this. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, sir. Members, any questions? I do. Yes, sir. Representative Bernal.
Just very quickly, I like this bill, and I like the way the representative said that it sort of levels out the playing field. Talk about your experience where, having not expanded it from where it is now to where it should be, where the bill to pass, the kind of opportunity that you wouldn't be able to get, that would go past you, right?
Thank you for that question, Representative. So in the past, specifically in the city of Beaumont, we were going after a project that they had going on, and not really knowing the bill as much as we should have known it. The job was somewhere around $300,000, and the local contractor was within that 5%. So we brought it up. We said, well, you say you want to go with the local contractor here. We're within 5%. I said, well, the vendors have a limit up to $500,000. Construction's only limited to $100,000. So in that case, if it was kind of leveled off, then we would have been qualified for that.
And so what happens is you've got a local guy who misses out on a contract, and you have to either call a state company or a national company to do work they could do. and the difference in dollars is small, right? And so our local business people are getting passed over, and they're losing over and over again to bigger business that don't need it as much as they do, and they take that money and go back to where they're from. Whereas if it were to go to you, tremendous impact on the local economy, right?
Yes, sir, Representative.
Right.
And, I teach plumbing school, and one of the things about training, I think we all know that costs money. So when we are able to land some of this work that's, paid with tax dollars, prevailing wage, and scale, that's how some of that's repaid. That's how we get more people into the plumbing program or electrical programs or things like that cost money.
And all the bill does is take that dollar amount from $100,000 to $500,000. This is not $20 million contracts.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Representative.
Members, any more questions? Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
Yes, sir. Chair calls Alvin Roberts. Thank you for being here, Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, sir.
Start off with your name, if you represent yourself, and your position on the bill.
My name's Alvin Roberts. I represent myself. The reason I'm in favor of this bill is just plain common sense, like was just dictated. I'm preaching to the choir on that. It's just raising the levels, and it's not changing the wording of any other part of the bill except the dollar amount. So it's just kind of updating the bill as it sits.
Yes, sir. Members, any more questions? No questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. The chair calls Matthew Uden. I'm pretty sure I said that wrong.
You did.
Yes,
You
sir.
said it right.
Oh, okay.
You said it right.
Oh, great.
Matthew Uding, representing Preferred Facilities Group USA, and I am in favor of this bill. I'll keep it brief. They've already touched on a lot of the main topics, but as a small general contractor, we heavily support this bill. We do feel like it does level the playing field with out-of-town larger contractors. And essentially, we're just updating this bill to match the economic times we're in. $100,000 in today's climate can get you a restroom renovation. So we're not talking about major dollars here, but what it does is it matches the material and equipment cap at $500,000 and makes it fairly simple.
Mm-hmm. Great. Members, any questions? No questions. Thank you so much, sir.
All right. Thank you for your time, Chair. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Chair calls Nathan Rivers. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you for having me, Chairman. Fellow committee members, thank you all for hearing this testimony today. Again, most of what I was going to say has already been said, so the only two things that I'll mention is one.
Oh, just start off, just for the record, your name, the organization, or if you represent yourself, and your position on the bill.
Yeah, I'm Nathan Rivers. I'm with CTEX Construction out of Beaumont, Texas, and I'm in favor of this bill.
Thank you, sir.
I believe that the value of these contracts staying local, those dollars turn over so many more times in the local community, and keep those dollars there. It's a huge benefit for the community, and also that this is not a mandate that the cities and municipalities have to use this preference. It just gives them the option to if they choose.
Yes, sir. Members, any questions? No questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Chair calls Jennifer Fagan. Thank you for being here, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman and members, excuse me. My name is Jennifer Fagan. I'm with the Texas Construction Association, and I've registered on the bill. TCA we have about 3,000 subcontractor members across the state. We receive feedback on a lot of legislation, and I wanted to just take a moment, and I visited with Representative Manuel about this, but to point out a couple of issues that our members have said. Again, we receive feedback on both sides of the bill. One of the concerns, though, is in the urban areas. You've got big Houston metro area, and you've got a lot of cities, small city councils, and small municipalities that are scattered around the edges of these DFW and Houston metro area. That and raising this cap raises the potential of potentially local favoritism that you may have in some of these smaller municipal areas, especially when you have, say, Houston metro area, and somebody's saying this person gets a local bidder preference, and their office is literally on the other side of the highway from mine. You know, when you have these compact urban areas with just a lot of different municipalities. So there's a little bit of concern there that this could open the gates for, or increase the possibility of some local chicanery. But I will also note that on the flip side, we have other members who noted, again, that this rewards some of our local subcontractors who spend time and develop those relationships with their local officials and our members of the community. And so it benefits them as well. So again, we've had members on both sides of this issue give their comments, and I just wanted to make sure I shared them with you.
Great. Members, any questions?
Yeah.
Yes, Representative Tepper.
Yes, sir.
So the resident of the municipality would be the homestead residents or the business residents of the municipality, according to the.
It's the business. It's my understanding. It's your local. You're a local bidder, and it's based on your business residence because it's your business location. I don't believe there's a residency requirement, but I could be wrong. I have the statute here.
Yeah, it says. I'm sorry. It says. Bidder whose principal place of business is in the municipality. If there's several offices, which is quite possible in a larger contractor, and I have a little question there, so talk about it later. Thank you.
And I will note that just to add a little bit of history, this provision in the local government code was added in 2011 when there was a huge revamp and complete rewrite of all of our government contracting codes. If you remember, Representative Caligari carried that bill, and it's a huge bill. And this was a floor amendment in the Senate by Representative Seliger, and the intent was to protect those rural local businesses and to be able to turn that money back into the local communities, as the prior witnesses have said. That was the original intent of the 500,000, which I'll note applies to all contracts, not just construction. Construction is limited to 100,000, and back then Senator Seliger stated that limit of the 100,000 was included based on a request from the industry. So I suspect there were similar concerns back then, but it was 2011 when that 100,000 was put in.
Okay, members, any more questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to testify on for or against House Bill 3245? Hearing none, the chair recognizes Representative Manuel to close.
Hello, and thank you all again. I just want to reiterate, this is a very good local bill. This is something that is going to allow our local governments to be able to make sure that we're leaving our money in our district. This isn't a mandate. I think this is also, if we're going to go from 2011, we're now in 2023. We need to move that legislation date up. We need to move that monetary means up. Groceries, gas, everything has gotten more expensive. I think leaving our rural areas behind is a mistake that I know I don't want to make, and I look forward to you all helping me get this there, especially with such an studious committee as this one is, with such a studious member. So thank you so much, and I close it unless there's any questions.
Members, any questions? Or any hazing? No? Okay. Okay. Well, no questions. Thank you so much, Representative. With that, the chair withdraws House Bill 3245 and leaves it pending at this time.
Should have asked him how it affects POCs.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, she's here. The chair lays out House Bill 1171 and recognizes Representative Cole. Hello, ma'am.
Chairman Lozano.
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chairman and members. This bill fixes an oversight in the current statute to allow Austin Travis County EMS personnel to maintain their civil service classification if Austin voters were to change the city government from a city manager form of government to a strong mayor form of government. Austin voters considered this proposition in 2021 Had that measure passed, Austin Travis County EMS would have lost civil service status because the current bracket only allows for a city manager form of government. This bill would ensure that Austin Travis County EMS continues to operate as a municipal service if the voters of Austin ever voted to move to strong mayor. I have one witness who will be able to answer any questions, and I reserve my right to close.
Okay, members, any questions? No questions. Thank you, ma'am. Just Chair calls Selena G. I don't think I said the last name right, but.
My name is Selena Shia, and I'm president of the Austin EMS Association. And basically what happened in 2021, a group put this proposition ordinance change on the ballot for Austin residents to vote for, to go from a city manager form of government to a strong mayor. And we had lots of conversations with legal staff at the Capitol, legislative legal staff, and they did agree that if that measure were to pass, that Austin medics would lose their civil service protections, even though we already got the measure passed through the legislature, and also the city of Austin residents already voted for it. And so all we're doing is just trying to preserve it and grandfather us in. We're the city of Austin to make the change. We did bring the same bill forward last session. It passed through the House, and then it died in the Senate on one of the last few days when a bunch of local bills died.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm here to answer any questions you all might have.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? No questions. Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on for or against House Bill 1171? Hearing none, the chair recognizes Representative Cole to close.
Thank you, members. I would love this to go to local and consent.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, with that, the chair withdraws House Bill 1171 and leaves it pending at this time. Chair lays out House Bill 3591 and recognizes Representative Shaheen to explain the bill.
Thank you, Chair Lozano, Vice Chair Gates, members of the committee. House Bill 3591 seeks to align the state requirement on the affordability periods for 9% housing tax credit programs with federal minimum requirements. The bill also raises the developer cap for project and makes TDHCA more efficient in their application process. The 9% tax credit program is a program run by TDHCA that provides tax credits to eligible participants to offset a portion of their federal tax liability in exchange for the production or preservation of affordable housing. HB 3591 addresses three issues that, if changed, would allow the agency with their partner developers to better support housing. It would also help streamline some of their red tape. So the three items that the bill covers: one, TDHCA has currently instituted an affordability period for the 9% tax credit program of 45 years. This is greater than the federal minimum requirement. So market forces, of course, everybody's aware of inflation, surging costs of goods, have made the financial return for these projects less attractive. And HB 3591 requires the state to match minimum federal affordability requirements of 30 years. Secondly, the amount TDHCA may allocate to the application for housing tax credit would increase to $6 million. It's currently at $3 million, again addressing rising inflation, cost of goods. The last time the developer cap was raised was 2013. Finally, HB 3591 would force some streamlining of TDHCA's processes by requiring the agency to deliver the commitment for allocation of housing tax credits to take no longer than 120 days. That, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions and reserve the right to close.
Okay, members, any questions? Okay, we'll let you reserve the right to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Chair calls Walter Moreau. Hello.
Walter Moreau, the Executive Director of Foundation Communities. I'm speaking against the bill. I've spent the last 30 years doing affordable housing. It's my passion. I've never seen a bill this bad that's this greedy. Instead of, the current practice is 45 years of affordability. This cuts it back to 30. the impact on families in 30 years when they get that notice that the rent's going to go up to market rates and they're going to have to move is very damaging. We should continue the 45-year practice. Many states go way beyond that. It eliminates the Executive Review Committee at TDHCA. So instead of a team of senior staff reviewing applications, gets rid of that oversight. It doubles the amount of credits that a developer can get from, it's not just $3 million, because these are 10-year credits. It goes from $30 million to $60 million. It could increase, in my opinion, from $3 million to $4 million, but to double it reduces competition and concentrates more risk by putting more credits in the hands of fewer developers. This remains a super competitive program. It is still attractive to developers financially to compete for this program. I really believe this is the intent of this bill is some developers wanting to get more money, do less affordability, and that goes against sound public policy. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, members, any questions? Thank you. No questions. Thank you, sir. Chair calls Sarah Anderson.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Anderson, and I am here representing myself. Hopefully, I am not one of the greedy developers that has just been mentioned, because I am in favor of this particular bill, and I certainly don't consider myself a greedy person, nor do I think that the developers who are in favor of this bill would categorize themselves as that. I think what we're looking to do is to clean up a couple of things and match market forces that have happened and occurred over the last 10 years. I'd like to address the extended use period is something that has increased from 30 years, it used to be 15 years, went to 30 years, now we're at 45 years. And it all sounds great. We're extending the affordability. The problem is that we're not adjusting the way things are done on the front end so that we can put more money into the deals, so that they can last longer, so that they can last 45 years. Underwriting has changed a little bit, but you essentially, 30 years is a long time for an apartment complex to survive without a new cash infusion. And the state keeps adding affordability, but not giving us the tools to last the 40 years. So without that tool, we're asking for a reasonable amount of time so that we don't find ourselves between 15 or 30 and 45 running slums. Let us get to a place that we can either recapitalize and bring it back into the program. But, really that last 15 years is becoming problematic. The second, for the developer cap, it's been 10 years since the cap has come into play, has been increased. And at that time, it was increased from 2 million to 3 million. And it had been 10 years before that. So we're looking at 20 years of increase of land costs, material costs, and other things. When I started in this program 20 years ago, you could do a deal, you could do 200 units at 1.2 million in credits, and you could do multiple deals. Now you can do one deal at about 100 units and at about $2 million. So what we have is we have our best and brightest developers in the state being limited to about one deal a year. And they can't make a living doing that. And we're seeing a lot of them having to go to other states now to be able to make a living. And I hate to see that. I want to see the best and the brightest stay here. So, the increase in the amount of developer cap is not a ploy. We still have to go through the process. You still have to be successful. You still have to compete. It's just saying we need the cap to be high enough to be able to do at least 2 deals a year for developers. And the third thing that I think may or may not have been discussed was the setting a 120-day limit for the for a cost certification process. Essentially, it's the end of the process, and it's where the state determines whether or not we've used all of our credits. It's an open-ended process. It's been a problem for 25 years. This is not unique to this executive director or this staff. But when you don't have an end date that somebody has to meet, you end up sliding, and the cost certifications can take up to a year. And we're just saying, please give the staff a deadline to try to meet. And, we feel like 4 months to review documentation should be sufficient. And I think that's it, unless anybody has any specific questions of me.
Members, any questions? No questions. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes.
Did you want to do this? If you just want to say the chair calls. The chair calls Sally Gaskin. Okay.
Hello, thank you, Chairman, members. My name is Sally Gaskin, and I am here speaking on my own behalf. I am a developer. I have been in this program since 1996. When we first started, or
Can you
when
tell
I
what's your position on the bill?
Oh, I'm sorry. I am Bill. Apologize. When I first started in this program in 96, we were doing our developments of 100 units or 60 to 70 units were $6 to $9 million. Today, they're 20. And so what we are seeing is in terms of the developer fee cap, developers are very limited. They are limited to doing at really only one deal per year for the most part. Because unless you're doing a rural, perhaps much smaller deal. So everything that Sarah said previous to me was very on target and correct in terms of how it's impacting, our really experienced developers in the state. And Texas has a tremendous program, and we really want to keep growing it. With great experienced developers. I also want to talk about the reduction from 45 to 30 years. That is also, without the infusion of cash, our developments do suffer. And we have, in the past, we've been able to refinance, resyndicate, but those resources are getting more and more scarce. So, if those resources aren't there during the 30 or 35-year, time frame, our developments are really suffering. They do need cash infusion to maintain the quality of the development, the desirability of development. And then the last thing is, the time period, the 120 days for the department to issue the 8609s, which seems to be very reasonable. So thank you very much for your time.
Members, are there any questions?
No questions?
Okay, thank you for testimony. Okay, call is Kit Saraya. Okay. Is there a Stephen here? Pop. Okay, come on up. State your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill.
My name is Stephen Papoon, and I represent myself, and I'm in favor of the bill. I'm a multifamily tax credit developer. I have been involved in the tax credit program from its inception in 1986. And our small company has financed and constructed 4,000 units in the San Antonio area. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today on legislation critical to the development of affordable housing. It is the most vital program in the country for creating communities for senior citizens, veterans, working families, and the disabled. As to the bill presented today, the intent is to keep the tax credit investment and development process as simple and straightforward as possible. Lenders and equity investors operate on a nationwide basis. We are always competing with other states for investment dollars. This process is long and expensive. The lenders and investors are very large and sophisticated. Their underwriting is extensive, and their analysis of comparative yields and cost of investment process all figure into the desire to invest and under what terms. Stated simply, they will give preference to places that provide the greatest opportunity, that are the safest and most economically advantageous. As a result of this analysis, the foreclosure rate for tax credit properties is 1/10 that of any other real estate investment. I encourage your support for this legislation. There's nothing more vital to a community and its residents than safe, modern, affordable, energy-efficient homes. Thank you.
Okay, members, are there any questions? Okay, thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else that wishes to testify on or for or against House Bill 3591? If not, the chair recognizes Representative Shaheen to go ahead and close.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. These developments don't happen without developers. And, you know, it's unfortunate to call them greedy. If somebody thinks they're greedy, maybe they can come forward and offer to have their salary cut, but I don't think that's going to happen. So having people make a fair profit is not an issue. As far as the 30 years versus 45, it's really quite simple. Do we want these individuals to live in nice homes, or do we want them to not live in nice homes? If you go 45 years, the incentives to upgrade, to do preservation work, those types of things, rehab, there's just less of an incentive. At the end of the day, there needs to be a financial incentive to do these projects. And so that's the reason to take it from 45 years to 30. It's a good program. The developer cap hasn't been raised in over 10 years. And we're all very familiar with what's going on with inflation and not. So what's before this committee is, do we want good, healthy, affordable housing that looks good, that's attractive to families with children, or do we want them to live in dumps? And that's what this bill does. With that, Mr. Chairman, I close.
Members, are there any questions for Mr. Shaheen? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
If there are no further questions, the chair moves to withdraw the committee substitute and to leave House Bill 3591 left pending. Any objections? Chair hearing none. Committee substitute is withdrawn and House Bill 3591 is left pending. Which one? This one. Okay, the chair lays out House Bill 3136 and recognizes Representative Campos to explain the bill. Do I go the rest? Oh, yes. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair.
Or hang on just a moment. It's my understanding there's a committee substitute, and the chair lays out the complete committee substitute.
That is correct. Thank you, Vice Chair and members of the committee. Good to see all of y'all. Members of the committee, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to lay out House Bill 3136 related to IRS Form 8609. This bill would require the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs to issue IRS Form 8609 no later than 30 days after an application is submitted by a qualified development owner. As you know, the TDHCA allocates federal tax credits to developers. These tax credits are then used by developers to subsidize the acquisition, construction, and rehabilitation of affordable rental housing for low-income tenants. To claim allocated credits on federal tax returns, developers need the IRS Form 8609. Instead of delivering this coveted document within a reasonable amount of time, the practice at TDHCA is to withhold issuance until the department completes a cost certification process that can drag on for months and often spanning years. Using Form 8609 as leverage to complete cost certification has led to needless delays for owners and investors in filing their tax returns. HB 3136 requires the TDHCA to issue 8609s at the front end of the cost certification process. Once a developer submits a documentation package that consists of all IRS required information for issuing the 8609, TDHCA is required to issue the document within 30 days. This bill will also requires TDHCA to prepare quarterly reports that include detailed statements of the reasons for the department's delay in issuing Form 8609 in the time required by this statute. In addition, I have spoken with TDHC, and there's some cleanup language that needs to be added to comply with federal requirements. I'm open to questions, and I reserve the right to close.
Members, are there any questions for Representative Campos? If there are no further questions, we will proceed to testimony.
Thank you.
Okay, the chair calls Michael Hogan. Go ahead and state your name, who you represent, and position on the bill.
Well, good afternoon, committee members, chairman. My name is Mike Hogan. I am in favor of this bill. Our company is Home Spring Realty Partners and Hogan Property Company. And over the years, we've developed a lot of low-income housing tax credits. I'm here in support of the bill 3136. This bill requires TDHCA to modify the low-income housing tax credit program as it relates to the project cost certification process of completed projects. The bill also requires TDHCA to prioritize both the information required by the applicant and the completion and issuance of the IRS Form 8609 within a period of 30 days from the completion of the information provided by the applicant. Doing this will be a very modest first step in streamlining the regulatory process to provide the project financial stakeholders their 8609 forms and to file their federal tax returns without the specter of financial penalties. To be clear, the bill does not eliminate any current requirements by TDHCA's cost certification process. The bill simply requires TDHCA and the applicant to prioritize and complete the IRS 8609 requirement at the very beginning of the cost certification process so that the form can be used in the timely filing for project's tax return. Doing this prevents the regulatory practice of holding the form until the very end of assembling the complete cost certification and prevents long delays for many months, even several years, to obtain the IRS Form 8609s from TDHCA. You've heard a lot about this form today. So what is Form 8609? It's required by the IRS form that controls, and it's a form controlled by TDHCA and completed by TDHCA, not the developer. The attachment of, and it's attached to the ownership federal tax return. Its timely filing with projects tax returns allows investor partners that have purchased the housing tax credits to offset their taxable income. Prioritizing the issuance of the 8609 form will encourage investor partners that the state of Texas recognizes and appreciates their financial commitment to the state's affordable housing needs. My personal interest comes from over 23 years of building, managing, and maintaining thousands of LIHTC units. There's never a time when the industry meeting of Texas affordable housing providers and its allied industries that I have attended, where there hasn't been a discussion, or if you will, stories about the practice of holding the 8609 forms, which are the most critical pieces of the economic stack, to the end of the cost certification process. Without a statutory change, this will continue to be an unnecessary bureaucratic regulatory burden on the financial partners and the stakeholders that provide Texas first-class affordable housing. After navigating through the impact of the COVID-19 shutdown, lingering material supply chain, and what I would call a devastating financial market currently, it seems reasonable to instruct TDHCA to move the process issuing the IRS 8600 form to the very beginning of the cost certification process. Doing this allows TDHCA to quickly issue the 8609 documents. In doing so, the tax credit investors can properly obtain the federal housing tax credits on a schedule for which they bargain. This bill goes a long ways in alleviating the financial burdens with still protecting the industry from bad actors. I'm going to stop right there. Thank you for listening. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Members, are there any questions for the witness?
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Chair calls Carla Deanda. Please state your name, who you represent, and your position on the filed bill.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Kara Deanda, and I am for the bill. And I was a CPA in public accounting for almost 15 years, practicing in the real estate development industry. I've since served as a CFO of a real estate development company for almost 10 years now, and we specialize in the low-income housing tax credit program. So like many other developers, our projects and financial investors have suffered financial burdens as a direct result of the delayed issuance of these Forms 8609. As a developer, as you've heard today, we raise equity dollars to support our LIHTC projects by selling tax credits to investors. The investor receives their investment return by claiming federal tax credits on their respective income tax return. So the timely delivery of these credits is critical for them to receive their projected return on investment. So much so that the partnership agreements that we negotiate with these investors have timing adjusters built into the calculation of the total equity that they will contribute to a deal. If credits are not delivered timely, equity is cut, and the housing project suffers the consequences. Many factors drive the timing of the credit delivery, and arguably the most critical one of those is the issuance of this 8609. The issuance of 8609 by TDHCA is required before the investor can claim a credit on their tax return. A couple of years ago, actually is in 2018, the IRS changed the rules through the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015 regarding the amendment of partnership tax returns. That act was intended to simplify the filing of partnership tax returns, but as a result, the low-income housing tax credit industry has suffered because of this 8609 issue. Prior to this act, the partnership and its partners could amend a previously filed tax return upon receipt of the 8609. So if they were earned credits in 2018, but the 8609 was not issued until, say, sometime in 2020, they could go back and amend the 28 return and receive those credits. This rule has changed that. Now those credits are only claimable in the year that the 8609 is actually received. So therefore, they have a 2-year delay in the time that they were actually to realize the economic benefit of those tax credits. So in order to mitigate that financial burden caused by these new IRS filing procedures, we must improve the efficiency of the cost cert review process and the timeliness of this issuance. This bill proposes a reduced amount of documentation that is required for the agency to review for issuance of the 8609 to comply with just the IRS code and regulations. Under the IRS rules, we're required to submit a schedule of project costs that is accompanied by a certified public accountant's audit report. The CPA's audit must be conducted in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, and it must be accompanied with an unqualified opinion. TDHCA has employed the process of auditing the audit, which has substantially increased the amount of time it takes the agency to review the schedule of project costs and has created multiple requests for additional information after the original submission. In our experience, no material adjustments to the project costs have resulted from this practice, but it has consistently delayed the final issuance of Form 8609 for months and sometimes years. So in my opinion, TDHCA has now taken on additional burden and perhaps additional liability than was ever intended by the IRS code. The purpose of the CPA audit report is to remove this burden from the state agency, and the practice of auditing the audit is causing some financial strain on our industry and ultimately inhibiting our ability to achieve our mission of providing high-quality, affordable housing to our communities. As you know, market conditions are very difficult, and developing real estate to provide affordable housing is quite challenging. So allowing an inefficient administrative process to cause additional financial burden on these projects is unfortunate. And we can eliminate that unnecessary burden by passing this House Bill 3136. Thank you all for your time.
Members, are there any questions for the witness? Thank you for your, yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. You had mentioned, I kind of walked in midway through your testimony. I was laying out another bill, my apologies. You were talking about the auditors, that they were being audited also. Did you mention that?
I did.
And this is something that TDHCA, this is their normal practice to do that?
That has been our experience, yes.
Okay. So I'm assuming we have a resource witness that I can ask some questions on.
Yes.
Okay. I'll wait till you call them up. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, the chair calls Stephen Papon again. Just state your name, who you represent, and the position on the filed bill.
My name is Stephen Papoon. I'm in support of 3136, and I represent myself. And I will just reiterate everything that was just said in the two witnesses before me. We want to keep Texas competitive. We want to keep the process simple because it is so expensive and it takes so long. And this is a tremendous need. Thank you.
Members, are there any questions? Okay, thank you for your testimony. Okay, the chair calls Sarah Andre. Just go ahead and state your name, who you represent, and your position on the filed bill.
Yes, sir. My name is Sarah Andre. I represent myself. I am a tax credit developer and consultant, and I am for the bill. Does everybody know what the 8609 is? It is literally, if you don't, it is literally just a form, just like a 1099 or a W-2. It is an IRS form. It has about 5 pieces of information on it. The amount of credits you qualify for, TDHCA's signature. Yeah, oh, this is what it looks like. Tiny form. I was shocked the first time I got one because I thought it was going to be more mysterious than that. I think that the two speakers ago really, and I'm going to speak in very plain language, brought the issue to the fore. The issue for a developer is that until you have this piece of paper, your investor cannot file for their credits, which means your investor is getting no return on their investment in your development. And you can imagine if you've ever invested in anything in your life, you start to get antsy when there's no return, even though all the milestones, such as lease up, the project's developed, you've passed an inspection, you've leased up, but you still don't have this form. As a consultant, I have deals that have waited 4 years for one of these. Now, I'm not going to say my clients are blameless in that process. There is give and take. And I really don't have a problem with any TDHCA staff on this. I think they are doing what they can with what they have. But they have one person who is where the buck stops on these. And, you know, he has to do 40, 50, 60 of these a year. And two speakers ago, I have forgotten her name, but she was correct in that TDHCA is basically re-auditing something that we have paid a certified public accountant to do. I would like to remind you that if a certified public accountant is found to do fraudulent acts, they lose their livelihood. So they have no interest whatsoever in doing a poor job. And in my experience, they do a very thorough job, and they ask a lot of questions, and we provide them tons of documentation. You know, here is every one of our pay applications from our general contractor. And they go through that just as they would if they were auditing any organization, and they fill out forms and get it put together. And then we give that to TDHCA. And if you are lucky, 6 months later, they pop out with this 8609. And then you can go on and get your investment into your development and keep going. I'll give you an example. I turned in an 8609 package, and these are pretty extensive packages, lots of information in there. Your financing, you know, that it's built, that you've passed inspection, that you've met every requirement, you have units that are accessible, et cetera. I turned one in on October the 8th. The initial reviewer did a great job. It was super fast. He was ready to route that for supervisory review on November 18th. That is this year. I checked in today, and the supervisor told me that he may get to that actual cost cert this week. So that's been 4 or 5 months. That is really quick. I was pleased. I was ecstatic. And so all this time we are waiting for this piece of paper so that our investors will give us their final equity installment. And if we have to do a bridge loan, you know, I have a small deal that's paying $1,800 a day in interest. That's not too bad until you multiply it times 120 days or 180 days, and you end up in the $200,000 and $300,000. So it's just adding to the cost of housing that we're desperately trying to keep affordable so that the, you know, workers of Texas have a decent place to live. So that's all I had to say, and in sum, I am in support of it, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to, you know, explain any nuances.
Members, are there any questions for the witness? Okay, thank you for your testimony. The chair calls Bobby Wickelson.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair, members. I'm Bobby Wilkinson, the Executive Director of the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, here as a resource on the bill.
Okay, thank you. And members, any questions? Representative Cortez, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Sir, good to see you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you answering some questions here on House Bill 3136. I also want to thank Representative Liz Campos for bringing this forward. She's definitely a champion of housing issues there in Bexar County and San Antonio, so thank you, Representative Campos. Sir, some of the testimony we heard today talked about, I keep going back to this part about staff. Your team needs to audit the auditors, and can you break that down a little bit better, because to me that seems completely redundant.
Sure. So part of the cost certification process is a audit report from a third-party auditor that's hired by the developer, and along with everything else in the cost cert, we do look at the audit report. Mistakes are found. I get the idea that maybe we should just lean on the audit report and just kind of take it at face value. I don't know that there's really risk to the department there. You know, ultimately, if there's something wrong and the development gets audited by the IRS and gets some tax credits clawed back, that's on them, not us. So I'm open to the idea of lightening the burden of cost cert. I think I have kind of two separate issues. One is just like a staff, how long review takes, and the other is what all we ask for. As far as
your team found that the auditor, the original audit had an error in it, and thus your second auditor had to fix that?
Yes.
That's happened numerous times? Does it happen all the time?
I don't have a number for you, but just anecdotally, yes, it's happened. But doesn't mean maybe it's not worth it. You know, even then, right? Finding some mistakes that maybe ultimately don't affect the department or the state. It's on that partnership.
Because then theoretically, we could cut down on this timing issue, not having to go through that second audit of the first audit.
Sure. So as far as timing goes, I think one thing that we're implementing now is, you know, we talked about, you heard in earlier testimony, going through one person, and so that's been eliminated, and so it's going to be a peer review. Just, you know, I review Steve's and Steve reviews mine. Just Steve's a made-up name. So this way it would there couldn't be a bottleneck, not in the same way. And we're all staffed up. We were low on staff. We're all staffed up now. We're doing this peer review instead of it going through the director, and I think that's going to speed things up. I don't know about like
that's the key. What you're saying right there to speed things up here, and that's basically what the bill is getting at. How to speed things up.
Sure
that we have good affordable housing options for all families in San Antonio, Texas, or wherever.
Definitely. The bill also is pretty specific on what we can ask for in the packet, and working with Representative Campos' staff and some stakeholders, I think they'd be willing to add a few things that are required federally. This idea of giving the cost cert at the beginning, it's like the completion certificate before the cost cert happens. I don't know. I'd have to think about it more. We couldn't adjust credits once 8609s are issued, without reviewing costs. There's the issue of it possibly being oversourced. And if it is, we have to cut some credits. Say the debt coverage ratio is way too high, that it's making too much money. We have a federal and a state obligation to not oversource it. I think there's definitely ways we can come to, a compromise on how to get there, without it being too automatic. Certainly, if it was just, you shall issue, but the application was deficient in so many ways, maybe through rulemaking we would just like terminate and they would reapply. But it's definitely on my radar. It's something I want to improve for the industry, and hopefully we won't have anyone up here next session.
I'm hoping so too. I think this could have been an administrative fix as opposed to a legislative fix. But unfortunately, we're at this point now where we feel like we have to pass a law potentially to change this for your department. And, this forum here seems to be, holding up a lot of potential great developments throughout the state and specifically in my backyard. And, a lot of workers are counting on these homes and these developers to take that sacrifice and that risk. And I don't want
to be clear, the developments are already built when we are going through the 8609 process and occupied. And
so this forum is what they're waiting on.
Right. And so it's the investors, I think, hold back, a final 10 or 15% that's what they're waiting on.
Which is pretty
substantial. Yeah, no, that's not nothing.
Cost to develop these housing, these type of, developments in the community. So, I'm hoping that, if there's any additional adjustments that need to be made, that we work with Representative Campos very quickly to get that done. So that way we can get this issue behind us and we can move forward in terms of providing good, affordable housing for our residents. And so I look forward to working with you and your department and assisting Representative Campos in any way.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Chairman.
Members, are there any other questions for the witness? Okay, thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify for or against House Bill 3136? If not, the chair recognizes Representative Campos to go ahead and close.
Thank you. HB 3136 seeks to ensure that the 8609s are issued within 30 days to developers who have awarded federal tax credits by TDHC. Again, thank you, Representative Cortez. And I think this is an easy fix, and we just got to figure out what we can do to get this done so that we can get the housing that we need and developers can get taken care of. And so, again, thank you all for your time and for allowing me to lay out this bill, and I ask for your vote. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Members, are there any other questions for Representative Campos? Okay. Thank you, Representative Campos. If there are no further questions, the chair moves to withdraw the committee sub and to leave House Bill 3136 left pending. Any objections? Chair hears none. The committee sub is withdrawn and House Bill 3136 is left pending. Okay, the chair lays out House Bill 238 and recognizes Representative Bernal to explain the bill.
Oh, I'm up. Okay, thank you, Chair. This bill has a long preface. I'm going to start by passing this frame down. You guys can pass it back. This is one of the migrant labor housing bills that we hear at this point every session. I've filed it in the 85th, where it came out of committee 6-0. I filed it in the 86th, where it was referred to urban but not heard. I filed it in the 87th. It passed out of this committee. It died on the floor, 71-72, with lots of our colleagues being absent. For the record, Representative Romero's bill, which we heard not too long ago, is a better, more thorough bill that he's worked longer on. But in the event, for whatever reason, we need to hear two, I'm happy to present this one, which is a smaller, less robust, much more focused version of that bill. The overall, we'll get into the details in a minute, but the overall purpose of the bill is this. There are essentially two universes of farm workers. The reason I'm passing this photo down is that it's a picture of my uncle in the fields. He was a farm worker. My father was a farm worker. My cousins of my generation were farm workers. It's very personal to me. And people in this building have no problem filing bills that benefit them and their self-interest. This is mine. There's two universes. One are the H-2A workers, right? And there is federal oversight and there's federal inspection. And by the way, Representative Romero, jump in at any time because you know this as well as I do, if not better. There's a whole other universe of farm workers. And the assumption in this building, which to me doesn't matter, but some people say, well, they're undocumented, so whatever. No, they're not. As that picture demonstrates, these people are not all undocumented, not that it matters, but they're not all undocumented, and they're not all H-2A workers. And that entire universe of farm worker, those farms and those areas are unlicensed for the most part and unregulated. And it has been that way since before my dad was born. We have done, for the most part, nothing for them. And they deserve dignity and health and safety and sanitation. And all the bill does is say that if a worker is in a situation that they believe violates what the law says the provider of the housing has to offer, they can file a claim, a private right of action with their lawyer to fix it. They can't get, under the bill, they can't get any money. There's no get-rich scheme here. All they can get is a fix to the problem. That is it. And right now, I'm going to read this. The bill would strengthen this penalty structure by creating a floor of $50 per penalty for each day the violation occurs and for each person that is living in the migrant housing facility at the time of the violation. Right now, there's a 1-800 number they can call, but this provides them a way to make sure that it gets it done. It provides the agency with a tool to do it. But this is something that I'm going to use all the arguments you hear in this building. Is this something the market will correct? No, it is not, because it has not. Have we been here before? Yes, we have. Do we recognize that this is a problem that needs to be fixed? We do, and I think there's a real desire by the agency to do that. But we haven't. And remember, and I'm not saying anything bad about them at all, but we, rightfully so, lionize and appreciate all the work that farmers do for us, especially during the pandemic, and they are certainly heroes among us. But that work doesn't happen on its own. There are people who literally walk into the fields, put their hands in the dirt, pick that food, and deliver it not only to transport, but then to our plates. And the fact that they get paid so little, which is a different bill, but the fact that they get paid so little is one reason why we can sort of afford to eat the way that we eat. And all I'm asking for, all I've ever asked for this is my 4th session, all I've asked for is that they get to work in a place that is clean, that is safe, and that if it's not, that there's some way to fix it. Now, I don't think they're here today, but people from certain industries will come and they will say, well, this is the part about the bill that we don't like. We don't want to create a get-rich scheme for trial attorneys. I get that. I think we've dealt with that, but we can do more. But my overall question to them is this: is there any version of this that you will accept? Is there any version of this that you will accept? The answer has to be yes, because if the answer is no, then that's all we need to know. So happy to answer any questions. Again, I defer to Representative Romero's bill. This is a piece of it. If you want us to put some of them together, we can. I want to be honest and fair about the work that he's done. But happy to answer any questions, and I reserve the right to close. Thank you, Chair.
Members, are there any questions for Representative Bernal? Go ahead, Representative Cortez.
Thank you, Chairman. And Representative Bernal, thank you. Again, this is how many times have you filed this bill? Fourth time. And I remember hearing this bill last session in the testimony, and you've been a champion for this, and I know Representative Romero also has been working at this. So I'm hoping that there's enough time this session to get it done. I appreciate you sending that photo around of your uncle. That speaks a lot and speaks volumes, and the type of hard worker he was and what he was doing for our country to make sure that we had all the foods and vegetables to eat. And so we don't forget them, we won't forget them, and hopefully this bill will get done. That's all I had, Chairman.
Appreciate that.
Okay. Members, are there any other questions? Go ahead.
So, Representative Bernal, you, in the hearing of the previous bill, there was discussions about your feelings in regards to this bill, in regards to those that are the most egregious, that they should first exhaust all administrative remedies possible.
Yes.
And so I know Mr. Wilkinson is here. He can speak on that. So I'm hoping you guys can have that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And in your forming of this language, can you elaborate on what your expectations are for the members?
Yeah. So you understand that industry often will respond worried that what we're offering is too draconian, right? That they are going to get charged $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a day because there's a missing light bulb. And all we really, the money part of this we don't care about. All we care about is making sure that people are working in safe, clean conditions, especially if those conditions are offered by their employer. And so the suggestion I made, which we're absolutely planning on and willing to incorporate, is that you give the employer a chance to fix something if you find something wrong with it. It's not that if we find something wrong on your farm, immediately we call a lawyer and you're going to get sued and you lose. It's we can call, you're made aware of the problem, you get a chance to fix it. You fix it, we're all good, we keep going. It's the penalties and the private right of action would be reserved only for those who are essentially refusing to correct the most egregious health and safety violations. Everything else I think we can fix in an administrative way, and we want to create both the longest but also the fairest runway for correction for both parties. What that looks like, we're open to negotiation. But there just has to be some version of this that's okay, that has real meaning, real effect, that does ensure a fair, safe, healthy working environment. Did that answer your question?
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, members, are there any other questions? Okay, the chair calls Gwen Nguyen. Please state your name and who you represent and your position on the filed bill.
Hello there. My name is Gwen Nguyen, and I'm here to support of House Bill 238. All right. Sorry, I'm really short. My name is Gwen Hung. I am the Senior Communications Associate for Woody Juntos. I'm here to testify in support of House Bill 238. As someone who's a child of immigrants, my mother who is a nail technician, and my father who works in a factory, I believe this bill is an essential step towards ensuring safety and protection of migrant workers. Migrant laborers are some of the most vulnerable members of our society. They are often subject to exploitations, discrimination, abuse, including in housing faculties provided to them. These facilities are frequently overcrowded, unsanitary, and lack in basic amenities like cleaning, water, and ventilation. This leads to a multitude of health and safety risks for these workers, and this bill is crucial and critical to measure that seeks to address these issues by increasing the civil penalties of violations related to migrant labor housing facilities. This bill will also create an incentive for landlords to ensure that migrant housing facilities facilities meet basic, healthy, and safety standards. Furthermore, this bill would also provide Department of Labor and Industries with greater authorities to inspect these facilities more frequently and ensuring that migrant housing is up to equitable living standards. And it's also important to note that this bill would also protect migrant workers from their landlords who may take advantage of their immigration status. Too often, migrant workers are subjected to substandard living conditions, and they may be exploited of their vulnerable position by withholding necessary repairs or services. Therefore, we have to also address the root of the cause of this issue by advocating for comprehensive immigration reform, dismantling systems that perpetuate exploitation and oppression, and we must support migrant workers' rights to fair wage, dignified working conditions, as well as adequate housing, regardless of their immigration status. I urge you to support this bill to help improve the living conditions of migrant workers, and we must work towards a more equitable, intersectional approach to dismantle this system that continues to perpetuate their exploitation and marginalization. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Chairman.
Go ahead, Representative Cortez.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your testimony, ma'am. You said you were speaking on behalf of which group?
WURI Juntos.
WURI Juntos?
Yes.
Can you tell me about this group?
Sure. We are a nonprofit organization that focuses on supporting and also advancing the rights of immigrants as well as Asian folks across Texas.
Y'all are based where in Texas?
In Houston.
In Houston. And is this a newer organization?
Yes, I guess. Yeah,
Okay.
I guess.
Just because I've been hearing the name more in other committees and testimony being provided, I was just wanting to get clarification about the group and what you all work towards. So thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you, Chairman.
Members, any more questions? Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on for or against House Bill 238?
Do we have a resource witness? Yes. No, we have a resource. We have a resource from TEA. Yes. Can I call him?
Okay. We're going to call up a resource witness from TEA. Chair calls Corey Green.
Bet you guys are wondering why there's a TEA person here for this. I just want to hammer this point home one more time.
Mr. Green, if you could just state your name and the agency you're with.
Corey Green, I'm Associate Commissioner with Texas Education Agency as a resource.
Okay. Representative Bernal.
Thank you. TEA, why are you here? Can you tell the committee a little bit about the migrant student program?
We have a federal grant program that serves migrant students across the state. We have roughly 18 to 20,000 students who are traveling with or to meet parents or guardians who are doing agriculture or fishing work out of economic necessity. It is their livelihood. So the federal program serves these students to ensure that we are meeting any challenges of their mobility, cultural language barriers that may exist, social isolation that may exist because of multiple moves in a school year, and other difficulties that are just associated with this migrant type of lifestyle.
And what was the number again?
18 to 20,000 per year.
18 to 20,000. These are Texas students. These are students in our public schools. These are not just the workers. These are the kids. And are they all, not that it matters, but because they're residents here, they wouldn't, there's nothing that tells us whether they are or aren't H-2A workers or their parents are H-2A workers, correct?
Not detailed information, no, but what we do know is the majority of these students are actually not H-1 or H-2 visa program parents. That's part of the reason the numbers of the students has gone down over the last 10 to 15 years, is many of the farm working companies are hiring more of the people who have the visas. They are typically either single adults or adults who are not bringing their children with them when they migrate to do the farm work.
Right. So
most of these students are actually the other side of the story you were talking about.
Right, and so these are the students, these are the people who most likely would find themselves in the living situations which we do not regulate, which we do not inspect, is the point I'm trying to make.
Correct.
All right, thank you, sir. Any?
Okay. Representative Romero.
So, if you could help me understand what these families may look like. Are these families that are moving around throughout the year or the families that you deal with through TA, are they typically, are you seeing those kids throughout the whole school year, or might they move multiple times?
Majority of the students in our migrant education program leave toward the end of the school year, so late April, early May, they leave with their families and go to northern states to do migrant farm work. They return back into our public schools maybe by the time school starts or early to mid-September.
And you know they have to give you an address to let you know where they live?
There's information that is gathered by the recruiters who are required. It's a required part of the program that every district who's taking the migrant education funds has to have a recruiter who actually goes out and finds these students, whether it's going out to the fields, going out to where the migrant housing is. And there is a detailed process for identification that includes verifying where they've come from, the reason they've moved to this location, that it's a qualifying work, and then there is a verification process of that for their eligibility, and they're only if they meet all the qualifications to meet the eligibility of the program are they included in our counts.
And then the recruiters, do they ever verify whether it's an approved licensed housing facility?
No, they did not.
Is that something that's ever been asked of your agency or your recruiters?
Not to my knowledge.
Has the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs ever communicated with you of the responsibility of those housing facilities to be licensed?
I am not aware of that.
Is that something that you think that we could arrange for there to be communication, or is there reasons why you would not be able to relay that information about housing to the department?
The only thing that would prevent us from collaborating on that would be if there is something in the federal rules about the migrant education program that might prevent it.
But right now, you don't know if there is?
I'm not aware of it, no.
Okay. Could you look into that and see, and if not, coordinate with the members as to how there's potential for verifying that the housing is a licensed facility? Thank you.
I'm sure there's a way to do. Those are great questions, by the way. I'm sure there's a way to do that, to try to do that data sharing, barring a federal requirement that we can't, that doesn't disclose the name or identity or personal information of the students themselves, right? You've been amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Representative Bernal. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on for or against House Bill 238? Hearing none, the chair recognizes Representative Bernal to close.
Thank you, Chair. Members, again, this is not a tweak. This is not adding a subpart Roman numeral 1 little part A. This is us doing something that we should be doing that we currently are not. We have a willing partner in the department, and I think the opportunity, the time is right for us to take a step forward and provide these people with the very, very basics that, I mean, we benefit from their work daily. The least we can do is make sure they're working in a safe, sanitary environment, both when they're out in the field and also when they're taking a break and sleeping. Thank you, Chair. I close.
Thank you, Representative Bernal. With that, the chair will withdraw House Bill 238 and leave it pending at this time. Okay, the chair lays out House Bill 3568 and recognizes Vice Chair Gates to explain the bill. Sir,
yes.
Is there's a committee sub?
Yes.
Yes, sir. So the chair lays out the committee sub to House Bill 3568 and recognizes Vice Chair Gates to lay out the complete committee substitute.
Okay, thank you, Chairman and members. I might be a little longer than normal, but this is a complicated subject, and I ask for your indulgence, and I think you will be amazed at what you may learn. House Bill 3568 is a bill to bring reform to public facilities, which are often cities or housing authorities that partner with a for-profit apartment owner to acquire or build apartment complex for today's purpose. The use of this tool, I'll call it, for today's purposes, I'll refer to it as PFCs. The use of this tool is an example of the unintended consequences of what can happen if we fail as representatives to be gatekeepers between the private sector who seek to avoid property taxes for their own gain and our constituents, the taxpayers who pick up the tab if it goes beyond intention. We must fully vet every piece of legislation responsibly to ensure that every dollar paid for by our fellow Texans is used properly for the benefit of Texans. Mr. Chairman and fellow members, unfortunately, the legislature failed its duties on May 21st, 2015, when an amendment drafted by a lobbyist was accepted as to a PFC cleanup bill, as it was referred to in the Senate. That amendment has now expanded into what is creating a financial disaster in our state budget and our school funding of epic proportion. It's already created a financial drain of billions of dollars in our future budgets, and few are aware of what's coming. The financials won't really start coming, the financial bill won't really start coming until about 2025. As I will show, there are an estimate now of over 200 plus projects that have been created consisting of new and existing projects with signed contracts that will produce tens of thousands of apartment units paying no property taxes since 2015. This tool, as I said, is commonly referred to as the PFC. These exemptions from all property taxes can last up to 99 years. The ideal of using a PFC for apartments was promoted as a way for private developers to provide for the public good and providing affordable housing in exchange for a property tax exemption. When it was recreated by the amendment, there was no clear goal on how to achieve this. No guardrails, no metrics to gauge or ensure that the public good is served. Now it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and the rush to do these deals has created a feeding frenzy to get deals signed before the music stops. Current legislation states that 50% of the units you are to be provided to people who make 80% of the average median income. And so, and sometimes adjusted by family size. For example, if you're in a particular area, the average median income is $60,000, then the people that would qualify would be those that make $48,000 or less. This is the only bill that addresses the following: providing at various income levels, starting at 50% of AMI. And then some units are to be provided at 60% of AMI and 80% of AMI. Or you have the option of doing a fewer at 30% and then doing another set as low as 30% of the average median income. My bill sets a maximum of rent that can be charged based on their income as 30% of their income. Concerning the PFC bill that you heard a little bit about last year, this room was full of people that came from the industry, from real estate lawyers, consultants, brokers, bankers, and mortgage brokers, and investors. And they were all there for one reason. They want to see the train continue where they can use the PFC model to eliminate their property taxes on the income side and or on the expense side of their balance sheet, and minimize the income side when they had to give up rent concessions for that tax exemption benefit. Last week, what we heard was a group to support a bill that allowed the ability to continue with little to no changes for dealing with new construction of projects, but maybe some slight changes in existing projects. HB 3568 increases accountability, increases transparency, and more importantly, it increases affordability. But you know, there was among the group last week and other people that don't make the millions. They are usually the nonprofit groups who advocate for the less wealthy of our community, usually minorities, families, and people who make well under the 80% median income. They were against last week's bill because they know it's not producing affordable units where it's needed. That's in the 2 and 3 bedrooms for families, and those are at the 30%, the 50%, and 60% level of the average median income. Members, HB 3568 gives us an opportunity to bring sanity to an insane program as it currently exists. We're not supposed to be here making winners or losers, and until last week, you probably never heard of a PFC. And after today, you probably hope to never hear of it again. But ask fellow members on the floor tomorrow if they've ever heard of a PFC, and they will probably tell you no, and watch how fast their eyes glaze over when you try to explain it to them. I can't stress this loud enough. I understand this as a business person, as a member of appropriations. This is a financial Armageddon freight train that's barreling down the tracks, and it's going to be big. There's no such thing as getting something for free. And you can't remove what will be billions of dollars from the local school property tax rolls and still educate those kids. There's no other legislation but this one that seems to address this properly. Only House Bill 3568 mandates 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms and sets minimum square feet for each apartment type. For example, I have a contract here. City of Dallas recently, last year, approved a project, 215 units. And so half of those have to be at the 80% of average median income. That's as low as they go. But 82% of those units are in studios and 1-bedrooms, apartments. So let me explain what happens. Let's say you have a 900 square feet that you're going to build. If you build it as a 1-bedroom apartment based on the rents that are in here for that size of an apartment, it's about $1,900. Well, that's above what someone can pay for 80% of AMI. So if the developer leases it to that person, they would have to lease it around $1,100. So they would lose a lot of money. So this is what happens. They take that size of an apartment and build 2 studios that are less square footage than that. But if they then rent it to a person for $1,200, they make more money combined, but now the $1,200 meets the requirement to lease to someone at 80% of AMI. So the developer loses no money. And that's why in a lot of these projects, the vast majority, this one being 82%, are done in small units, in studios. That's why my bill sets the minimum is a 550 square foot 1-bedroom apartment. And then it sets minimums for the 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms. Now, the way this is structured, I can almost guarantee that the developer will never lose 1 penny on those units in a 1-bedroom and studio. The remaining units are broken down into a few 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms. I did the calculation based on an average market rent that they list in here for each of their units. And at the most, I can see is that they will lose about $200,000 in rent over an annual period. Now, they valued this project in this brochure at $49 million. In Dallas, the tax rate is about 2.5%. That includes your school, your city, your county, and the other taxing authorities. Well, that works out to about $1,250,000 that they get to save in taxes each year. The rent is, like I said, not hard to calculate because they list it in here. But wait, I'm still not done. It gets worse. There's a 7.5% sales tax exemption on all the material during the construction of the project. So if they project in here, it's a $49 million project. Let's say half of that is for construction materials, the concrete, the piping, and infrastructure. Well, 7.5% on half of that is $1,835,000 in tax savings. And none of that goes to the tenants. It all just goes to the developer. Now, on the same day that they approved that, they also had another contract that's dealing with a 300-unit complex that they signed a memorandum of understanding to Ohala Partners. Now, along with this, they listed all the projects that this developer has done. And so I added them up. This developer has done 3,873,000 units, or 3,873 units, consisting of 12 projects. And this one developer has done in 2 cities, Houston and Fort Worth, and all of them were PFCs. Now, if you take the $49 million for this 208-unit project and divide that 208 units into that $49 million, that gives you what it costs per unit. Multiply it by the 3,800 units this guy has done, and that comes out to about $1 billion in value of property that's been wiped off the tax rolls. And that's all from just one developer. Why would a city do that? That's $23 million in taxes just wiped out. Well, there's something in the industry that's called the pilot. It's called a payment in lieu of taxes. The industry created this themselves. and it's not in the legislation. Here's what happens. It's commonly done in these deals, and the city of Dallas negotiated a payment in lieu of taxes. So they're one part of that pie of everyone that pays taxes. Well, they negotiated a payment to them that basically covers their taxes. So they have no skin in the game. But by them making the decision, everyone else in the pie gets they don't get any taxes based on their decision signing this one contract. And they get that payment from the developer for 75 years. Now, this is the irony. They put in a contract to benefit themselves, but there's nothing in the contract that has a minimum to benefit to the tenant. There's no mention requirement that there has to actually be a benefit to the tenant. If they can structure the project where all the units that are built are basically at market rent, then the tenants get no benefit, but the developer certainly gets their part. Now, if you look at, what about the school taxes? As you said, when you look at the whole pie chart of the taxes, there'll be usually a management district gets a small part, then you have the county, then you have the city. Well, the vast majority of the property taxes is to the school district. Well, why aren't they complaining? Well, as I explained earlier, these deals, most of them are still under construction, and they're at some phase. And like these deals, it won't be till 2025 probably when those deals are completed and they're occupied. And that's when the school districts will be sending an invoice to the state, to the legislature, asking for a certain amount for each, for each day that the kid is in school. Because under the Robin Hood plan, and it's a part of our state constitution, we fund, let's say, $10,000 per student. So when the school district sends how many kids are enrolled, they get the difference between what they collect locally, and the state has to kick in the rest to get it up to that 10,000. Well, if you wiped off $1 billion in property taxes, the amount you're collecting locally drops. Well, who fills that gap? It's the state. And so that is the coming financial Armageddon that I'm talking about. When all these deals are finally built and all those are filled and those kids are starting to be educated, that's when it's going to start hitting the state budget. And that's sort of an unfunded mandate. I can tell you on appropriations, we're not even aware of that coming. Now how does the state the state pay, when they pay that, the first thing that's going to happen, the state controller is going to find out that there's not as much money coming from the district. So they're going to put out a call to the appraiser and say, what's going on? Are you not raising your appraisals fast enough? The appraiser is going to say, hey, we're raising them just as fast as anyone else. It's the fact that all these properties are not paying any school taxes is why we're collecting less. Well, then that's when the controller is going to be telling appropriations, hey, you're not collecting any money. Now, where does the state get their money? They get it from state sales tax, from the franchise tax, from oil and gas industry. So what's happening, what's going to happen is we're going to have to raise our state sales tax because of this gap that's starting to develop. And many of us here on this committee, I don't have any PFCs in my district, but we're all going to be paying for it from across the state of Texas for the few cities that are participating in these deals. What's really egregious is like I said, many of us, we don't have these PFCs in our district. House Bill 3568 doesn't, some other things that it's going to do, it doesn't allow you to discriminate against vouchers. Most of these programs have never taken families that are on some kind of voucher program. And here's probably the biggest change, or the biggest thing in my bill, is it's going to require that you're going to have to do a pro forma when you enter into these deals between the city or whoever is the sponsor and the developer, and they're going to have to show that 60% of the tax savings is going to go to benefits and reduced rent for the tenant. That's a pro forma that has to be done, and you have to structure your contract. Now, you can do more than that, but it has to be a minimum of 60%. And if it's an existing property, that before you can put that existing property into a PFC, it has to be located in what's referred as a high opportunity census tract. You must spend $25,000 a unit to rehab that, for rehab, and the rehab must be for capital items as defined in the tax code, and it has to be done within 3 years of the acquisition of the property. Last Tuesday here in Urban Affairs, I referenced that a Houston Housing Authority was on that very day having a meeting while we were having our meeting approving additional PFC deals. Well, this past Friday, the front page of the Houston Chronicle gave a recap of that day. This article could not be more timely in showing what a monster we have created. But first, let me give you a brief history on PFCs. Earlier, as I mentioned, how a PFC was changed in 2015 when House Bill 2679 was heard. It was about PFCs, and at that time, the PFCs were used to create jails, public schools, and other government facilities. One witness testified in the House and the Senate on that bill. A private bond attorney representing the city of San Antonio Housing Trust, PFC, testified that it was a cleanup bill. On May 21st, 2015, a few days before the end of session, a Senate floor amendment was added on the Senate side. And it's been represented that the same person who was the only one who testified at both of those hearings brought this amendment to Senator Estes. And Senator Seliger asked Senator Estes if this would be for nonprofits, not for profit. Senator Estes responded, "That's correct. Yep, that's correct." This witness went on to create the first PFC deal for apartments in 2016. And when I obtained these contracts that I was holding up here just a moment ago, both of them list that individual with Bracewell and Patterson as corporation counsel for both of these deals. Now, that I discussed a few minutes ago. He also testified to this committee last week. And I got a copy of his, or I wrote down it, or transcribed his testimony. He said, "I've probably done 40, maybe 50 public facility corporation deals around the state, all of them for new developments. It seems that he has cornered the market on new developments for PFCs. And that's what I've learned about this billion-dollar industry. It's heavily concentrated in a small group of lawyers, consultants, and developers." The witness ended his testimony that, let me go to that part. "I've been through the bill and helped write it." That is a bill that you heard last week. It's a bill written by the industry. I can assure you they didn't write my bill. In 2016, the first two PFC deals were done by NRP in San Antonio. Within 3 years, in 2019, there were 17 PFCs deals done, were completed. 1 year later, there were 30 PFC deals, and 10 of them were in Houston. And just in Houston alone, from 1921 to 1923, in 2 years, there were 67 more PFC deals. Last Tuesday, while we were in here testifying, this article recapped what went on last Tuesday while we were here discussing. Houston, the City of Houston Housing Authority discussed 32 more PFC deals. That day, they approved 10 of them for final approval. They signed 14 more memorandum of understanding, and then it appears they ran out of time because they had to postpone the next 8. But that was 32 in 1 day. It's estimated that 70% of all projects that are being sold in Houston in the last 2 quarters were consisting of owners converting to a PFC structure. Most of those which Houston approved last week are existing properties. And the reporter that did the article went and investigated to see what the current rents were at those properties. For example, in the complexes the reporter looked at, I also called up each one of those complexes and found out what the rent was for those different unit sizes. And guess what? I came to the same conclusion as the reporter. The rent, the housing, Houston list, the rent that the Houston Housing Authority listed for rents at 80, or what you can charge for those at 80% and 60% of AMI, what you can charge was actually higher than the existing rents at those projects, which meant the owner is not going to lose any money and having 100% of their taxes wiped out. So why is the City of Houston doing this? I can only assume it's probably because of the payment in lieu of taxes. I haven't been able to get to the contracts yet. Now, some final points that are the difference about HB 3568 and anything else you've heard is there's going to be an audit. And the audit is going to be done on each deal by the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs. And I've sat down with them several times, and we've worked out what the audit is going to consist of and what the fee is going to be to do that audit. The industry, and the bill that you heard last time, they want to actually have their own auditor do the auditor, or to be the auditor. But you know, that just opens it up to further abuse. You know, what stops someone from seeking 2 or 3 audits and then picking the one that's the highest, that meets what they want? Unlike other PSC bills, in this one, 35, mine, if you fail to provide the benefit to the tenant, there's a penalty. It's 125% penalty of what you did not provide in the benefit to the tenant. And you still have to get back into compliance or you're going to lose your exemptions. I told you the story last week about a management district that was here in Travis County that did a deal up in Dallas. And they had a management fee of $135,000 a year. Well, that's going to be eliminated. You can only do a PFC deal if it's within your jurisdiction. Now, the Texas Department of Housing will also audit how close, after you've done the deal, and when you then come into your first audit, we're going to have the Texas Department audit and see how close you came to that 60% benefit that you're supposed to be giving to the tenants. This is going to help us in future legislation to make sure that this program is working the way that it has. You know, and the industry shouldn't have a problem with this, because that individual that that talked about that helped create this said last week in his testimony, the one thing is that almost every single deal I do, there's an analysis by a financial advisor. We get a detailed pro forma, and that financial advisor goes through and actually looks at, here's the taxes given up, and here's the benefit because of the lower rents. I'll tell you, there's not a lot of benefit most of the time when we do efficiency units. He said that in his testimony, even though he's out here approving deals that have 82% of efficiencies in 1 bedrooms. We're also, my bill eliminates the pilot. There's no more payment in lieu of taxes. That way, that's going to, you know, the cities or whoever does these deals, they're going to have skin in the game. And they're going to make, and this will, I think, motivate them to do an even better deal than the 60% to the tenants, because now they're going to be motivated to do the best deal for the tenants. My cities right now are not on the same side as the taxpayers often, or the tenants. We as elected officials are accountable to our constituents to ensure that we get the best value for those we represent. The Department of Industry, you know, was doing just fine prior to creation of this vehicle in 2015, paying its property taxes just like any other business. What my bill does is ensure the tenants are receiving at least 60% of that tax saving. Now, the industry will absolutely not state a minimum right now. They won't say a minimum of what they give to the tenants, but they'll verbally tell you, trust us. We analyze and we make sure there's a benefit. But that is so intellectually dishonest. Anyone in business who has applied for any kind of a loan, whether to build an apartment complex, a restaurant, shopping center, or whatever, that lender that you go and get that loan from will require you to produce performance. Everyone in this room involved in these deals know the lender is going to require a performance that describes exactly what is the benefit in exchange for no property taxes. You know, currently what you have is developers going to go to the city and say, hey, we're going to give you this deal so we get these, and we're going to give all these wonderful benefits to the tenant. Then they're going to turn, and so they get that tax exemption. Then they're going to tell their lender, hey, we're getting all of our property taxes wiped out, but it's really not affecting your income because we've done this. And so, you know, it's kind of disingenuous. I've had the help from many groups in trying to help prepare this bill that we have in front of you. And I want to point two of the things where I probably have gotten the best help. Is last session, when I was on Urban Affairs, we did an interim study on these PFCs, and part of this committee was a report, a 6-page report that I had added that really came up with based on what I was able to determine through studies and through our interim study and recommendations and analysis to why we needed these changes. In addition to that, there was a couple years ago in 2020. the 63-page report put out by the University of Texas at Austin School of Law Entrepreneurship Community Development Clinic that studied all the PFC deals up to that page. And this, in this is many of the suggestions that were made as part of this bill. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your patience, and I'm happy to answer any questions and ask for the opportunity to close.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gates. Representative Cortez.
Thank you, Chairman. And Representative Gates, painfully obvious to me that you were unprepared and not ready for today. And thank you for that bill layout. You know, that was impressive. A lot of work. We heard a similar bill like this last week in committee also. Could you tell me maybe the one main difference between your bill and that bill?
Probably the main difference is for a new development. Currently, part of the problem is half of the units can be leased to people at 80% of AMI. And that bill basically keeps that in. Now, if you don't have government officials approve that, you know, if you just go to the housing authority, then you have to have a certain amount at a lower AMI. Probably and there's no requirement that you have to have units in 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedrooms with a minimum size. Mine has units where you're going to also have to go all the way down, even for new developments, even with elected officials' approval, you're going to have to provide units at the 50% and the 60% level, as well as the 80%. Probably one of the things that's going to cause the biggest, I think, help in using this PFC model is the fact that you're going to have to do a pro forma, and you're going to have to show that those signing that agreement are going to have to sign in with financial analysis backing it, that 60% of the tax benefit is going directly into lower rents. And I think wiping out or doing away with the payment in lieu of taxes is going to put pressure on those that do this deal. Because I think at the end of the day, what's going to happen is there is going to be a big drop in the number of deals that are done. The quantity is going to go down, but the quality of what's done is going to shoot up. Because now we're going to get a lot more done with a lot fewer units. What you're going to wind up is with people whose total goal is to provide affordable housing for those that need it. These, you know, the ones that need it are down in the lower income, down in the 50% to 60% level. Trying to provide affordable housing for people at the 80%, while it's a noble goal, that's not where the need is. The crisis is down in families. And currently even under the current legislation and what was proposed in the bill you heard last week is there's no requirement that it has to be 3 bedrooms. No requirement. And that is where people are hurting, is families that need 3 bedrooms and need it down at the 50% level.
Okay.
And I think that's key. Also,
I think you answered
okay.
main
Okay, that's fine.
I appreciate it.
Because I had more, but go ahead.
Well, no, it's fine. I appreciate it. I respect your work into this and all the background you did in this. And the bar has been raised, members.
Yeah.
This is a bill layout right here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman.
Bernal?
Representative Gates, really appreciate the amount of time you put into this, and I think, the last time we were here, people talked about really diving into affordability and getting to a better place. And so just for the benefit of the members and also for myself, can you talk about the way that AMI, one, what it means, two, how it's calculated, and what's the smallest geographic area you can use to calculate it?
It's usually it's the average median income, and to do it properly, you need to base it off, yes, by smaller geographic. And my bill actually says if you are in a geographic area that doesn't have good data on the average median income, then you use the statewide average median income, which is often lower than what many other regions is. And so if you have let's say in the Austin area, the average median income for a family of 4 might be $90,000. So 80% of that would be 72. Now, a family of 1, it might be down to, say, 60,000. Now, San Antonio is going to be much lower because Austin is actually the highest one of the highest ones in the state.
And so the geography that's used is by the municipal, it's by the city or the county?
That's right.
And again, just referencing, this is my last question, Chair, referencing the conversation we had last week, someone was saying that 80% AMI in X part of, let's say, Houston, for example, was sort of different than 80% AMI of Y part of Houston, or Houston versus Katy. Assuming that that's true, what's the solution to that, or how does your bill help resolve that sort of inconsistency? Is it the fact that you're drilling further down into affordability? Is that the way you get around that strange nuance?
Well, say in the city of Houston, then you would use for the city of Houston. Now, the developer in the city, whoever is putting the deal together, they can drill down as small of an area, I suppose they want, because there's no bill that sets that you have to, it has to be this exact geographic area. But it is based on the average median income, that project has to be located in the area that you're trying to determine what the average median income is.
But you're saying that area could theoretically be smaller than the city you're in. So, Representative Cortez, for us, it might be, you could do the city of San Antonio, but could you do an area inside Loop 410 versus outside Loop 410? Are you allowed to do something that narrow?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll have to look into that, because, we certainly want to create a situation where someone goes into a very high area and uses a very small geography to get that AMI way up there. But it was under an assumption that it would be, let's say if you went to the city of Houston, you basically do that area.
And this might be for another witness, but the reason I'm asking that question is because I also believe that one thing that gets lost in these conversations is putting affordable housing in what we call high opportunity areas, right? And and often high opportunity areas have sort of drastically different incomes than other parts of the same city. And so that's just where my head's at, but I appreciate it. And anyone else who's going to testify, that's sort of a standing question for all of you. Thank you.
Okay.
Representative.
And I'm going to look into that a little bit more.
Representative Tipper?
Well, to follow up on that, is the AMI from the Department of Labor on that metro area?
Some kind of, yes. It doesn't state exactly what census tract you have to use. You can use the that census or the government census, U.S. government census.
When these projects are developed 50, 60, 80, are half the units are half the units at market and half the units are at 80%, a mix of 1/3 of the units are 50, 1/3 of the units are 60, 1/3. Is it different for each project?
That's a good question, because this is why, actually, if on a new development, let's say typically in the market right now, it's 50% or half the units have to be leased to people at 80% or less. My bill on new developments is actually only 36% of the property, because we go all the way down to 50% level, and because we require 3 bedrooms. That's where a developer is going to lose a lot of money leasing to someone, because you have to lease. The way the bill is structured is you're going to wind up leasing the exact proportion for each bedroom size at each income level. So you are going to have to lease to 3-bedroom apartments that are minimum 1,000 square feet at the 50% of AMI. And so when you do the math on that, we couldn't keep the number up at half the project in that kind of a scenario.
I guess, but are some of the units that are 3-bedroom at market rate and some
the developer
of them are at 50%?
Yes, they can do the rest of their property, they can do whatever they want. They can they don't have to build 3 bedrooms. In fact, that brings up a good point, because one of the things that right now, very few projects, 75% of projects being built today have no 3 bedrooms. And in fact, in San Antonio has the highest in the state. Each of their projects right now, 7% are 3-bedroom units. Austin and Houston is around 5%, and Dallas only 1.7% of their projects include 3 bedrooms. So that's why this bill is sort of, it does have a little bit of a focus to make sure there is a minimum. So the developer probably won't even do any 3 bedrooms after that. Now, but it's a little bit different on acquisitions because you can't force a 3-bedroom in an acquisition if it doesn't have it. Right. So it does use what's called proportionality. So if they have it.
What percentage of these projects do you think are acquisition after the fact, acquisition properties?
Right now, it's probably being driven more by acquisitions because of because this is what's happening out there. Because of the economic situation that's going on with rising interest rates, developers are trying to convert to PFC because their current deals are not working financially. So brokers and so forth, is known in the industry, if you can get your taxes wiped out and your tax savings is greater than what you have to give back in rents, then you actually increase the operating income of that property. And now that allows you to be able to borrow more or maybe get back into performance on your loans because a lot of properties are struggling. So that's where it's being driven. It's not producing all these, and that's why my bill doesn't really want to allow acquisitions because you're not adding affordability units to the stock. And so that's why it's sort of limited in certain situations. Because, you know, that's just, you're just churning a property, basically.
Are these multifamily projects, are they usually variable rate financing? Are they being affected by the increasing interest rates?
Sure, yeah. Every adjustable rate is being affected now, not only increasing rates, but you have to wind up paying rate caps and so forth like that, and that gets to be expensive. So, yeah, it creates a lot of financial stress when you have the Federal Reserve raising interest rates so great in 1 year, that's faster than what you can raise income.
I'm still a little foggy on the pilot payment in lieu of taxes. That's hammered out with the city when these are hammered out and agreed to. And what is the factor? The payment in lieu of taxes, what is that?
That is just negotiated. There's nothing in the current legislation.
Negotiated with the city.
Or whoever the developer is doing the deal with. If they're doing it with the city or another government entity like a county or a management district, they negotiate a payment in lieu of taxes because that particular entity has decided, hey, we don't want to lose all of our taxes. So if we're going to lose our taxes, we want you to pay us something to compensate for that.
That's an upfront cost to the developer, and is that the people who finance these deals agree to that?
Yes, because that's part of what they've negotiated. So let's say in that particular Dallas one, that $1,350,000 or $1,250,000 in tax benefit you're getting, they're probably going to lose about $200,000 a year in rents. The city of Dallas negotiated a fee of about $200,000 a year. And so that developer will have to pay that every
$200,000 a year over 10 years or?
I didn't look, but I'm assuming it goes for the whole 75 years. That's usually how it's.
75 years?
Yeah, for whatever the length of time that the tax benefit.
$200,000 a year, that's amortized over the life, the 75 years.
Right. And they may have adjustments in there after that, based on inflation or whatever. But you add all that up, let's say in that example, that's still about $400,000 of the $1,250,000, which works out to around 30% of between tax benefits and the cost to the developer.
And are you saying that the difference that they're paying the pilot and the full tax burden is the difference being made up by the state? Is that what you're saying, why appropriations matters?
Well, it's under the school funding, we have to, let's say the state makes sure that every kid that's educated in the state of Texas, whether they're from Lubbock, Houston, Austin, wherever, is to make sure it's $10,000 a student. So you have some areas of the state that don't collect a lot of taxes, and so the state makes up the difference.
Got it.
So in Dallas, if they wipe out for apartments, they're collecting a lot less, and that difference is what the state's going to be paying.
That's a consequence of the taxes not being paid, is that the state makes up the difference per student down the line.
Down the line. And that's why it's not, that's why we're not hearing on appropriations, is because these deals, this just started 8 years ago. And the big part of these deals have been exploding in the last 3-4 years. And so it takes about 3 years to negotiate a contract and then go out and get your lending and get your financing and start construction and then build the place and then start filling it out. That can be 3 years. That's why there's no occupants in a lot of these. But when they start hitting, I think about 2025, that's when we're going to start seeing it on the state budget side.
The deals are hammered out with, you said it could be the state, the deal can be hammered out with the city or the county. Do the school districts ever participate?
No, school districts have never participated that I'm aware of. It's usually have been cities, counties, or their housing authorities.
Housing authorities.
And this bill still allows you to do it with a housing authority, but then.
Have the school districts ever expressed concern with this, or they just know the difference will be made up by the state?
Their only concern is they know on the tax side they're going to be okay. What they are beginning to be concerned about is when they do a bond fund, that comes from the taxpayers. So if all the apartments have been exempted, then that's going to put a burden on everyone else to have to pay that bond, because that's not paid by the state. Right. So when they raise money through bonds to build a new school or something, well, that's when they're going to start feeling the pain, because they're going to say, hey, that's when everyone else, the homeowners, their taxes are going to be higher than normal because of this segment of our economy has just been exempted from property tax.
Have the school districts expressed any concern, or are they not are they not alarmed by this?
It's just like right now, we sitting on appropriations aren't aware of it. School districts really aren't aware of it because because when you have a new development, it's usually on, of course, vacant land that's not really paying much in property taxes. So it really hasn't been an issue. That's why I'm out here trying to sound the alarm about this financial Armageddon train that's coming that we're going to get hit with. And if we don't bring some insanity to this thing, there's going to be some significant consequences on down the road here.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, Representative Hayes.
Vice Chair Gates, thank you for that extraordinary amount of work and command of the abuses that have arisen under Section 303 of the Local Government Code, allowing tax credits for affordable housing. And I think what you were just explaining, maybe it's not clear. The project goes into an entity that is off the tax rolls, non-taxable. You might recall last week I asked one of the speakers. Thank you. I asked one of the speakers in one of my cities. My mayor called me and said, "Hey, we got a pilot offered to us. It'll pay us the improved rate of the project, all the taxes, for 75 years, and we get a little extra. We get money up front. We get money every year. The pilot's payable." So they were very excited about the opportunity, but they were alert enough to understand there was maybe a problem, because since it was off the tax rolls, the schools get zero, the county gets zero. So that was a problem with him. But what I just heard you list, at least 10, I wrote down 10 abuses that have arisen. I think these are unintended consequences that happens with many laws. The eligibility of tenants, the percentage of tenants who would be eligible, the rent amount being at or above the 80% AMI, no underwriting requirements, the size of the units available have in the past only been for efficiencies in one bedroom, no annual reporting or registration, no limit on the geographic location where the PFCs could be located and done, and most have been done by these MMDs. Notice to other affected governmental bodies, no audits, and only requiring approval by the city itself, who then receive the pilots when the ISDs don't. So I think part of the reason your bill is so comprehensive has to address not only those but other abuses. Now, second point I want to make is thank you for the comparison of your original bill and the committee substitute. That was incredibly helpful. it would probably be very helpful for us to have a comparison between your committee substitute and the committee substitute that we were presented with last week. I think that goes back to the question that Member Cortez asked, what is the main differences? Because that's what's going to happen. I think both of the bills are very good. I think they're both going to come out of the committee, but somehow that going to have to be resolved on the differences of those two. So let me ask you this, and it was just touched on by the member here. How do PFCs affect the school funding formula? I'm understanding you to say it has no real effect at all, just since there's less value on the rolls?
And Representative Hayes, Vice Chair Gates, we do have a TEA resource witness, the Deputy Commissioner of Finance.
Okay, thank you. I'll wait for that.
Okay.
I've got one more. Can I have a follow-up?
Yes, sir. Representative Tepper.
So maybe you both can help me. When these deals are hammered out from either the housing authority, the city, or the county, does the project become exempt from, can the city make a deal for the county? It comes off the tax rolls at the appraisal district entirely?
That's right. It's completely off. And
So if the city hammers out a deal for one of these projects, they're also making a deal for the county without the county realizing it?
That's right. Now, my bill requires that you got to give them notification, but there's nothing out there that says they have to approve it.
They who? The appraisal district?
The other
taxing
entities. And that's another reason why we're taking out the profit motive or the payment in lieu of payment. That's completely eliminated. And Representative Hayes, I mean, I couldn't argue more strenuously that there is significant differences between the bill you heard last week and this one. It is night and day. You're not going to have the same people supporting that bill. They're not going to be standing up here today telling you they support this bill. It is significantly different. This changes the current system, and it really helps change it more to sanity. But did I answer your question? Okay. And that's the other thing. The other bill doesn't take out the payment in lieu. They can still continue with that. And that's a big driving factor of what allows these developers to do so many deals. Without that payment in lieu of taxes, I can tell you the number of deals done, that is going to probably be one of the biggest things that's going to drop down the level of activities. Look, I'm perfectly happy doing these PFC deals as long as the benefit is worth what the taxes that are being taken off. There has to be some better balance in here.
Members, any questions?
Say that one more time. Sorry. The payment in lieu in your bill
is gone. You can't do it anymore. So when a city goes out now and negotiate these deals, they've got skin in the game. Their taxes are also going to be wiped off. And so now you're going to have the developer's going to be over there all by himself, okay? And now you're going to have the city negotiating on the behalf of the tenant. Now is going to have the city really arguing more aggressively on their behalf to make sure that as much as possible is going to the benefit that it's supposed to be designed for, and that's reducing rents for those that need it.
Thank you.
And again, I said, and then you have to do a pro forma, and it has to be shown at a minimum 60% of the tax savings is going.
And that's audited.
It's going to be audited, and there won't be. If you don't meet, let's say that the tax department does the audit and they come up with only 52%. Well, we're not making the bill that you have to make up that part, that gap. But by knowing how close how they're performing, it will help us to be able to determine that this program is working as it's intended. And, I would assume the cities, since they're not getting anything, they're going to be more motivated to make sure that they meet that minimum 60% because they gain nothing if it's less. And I would hope they have the right to write in their contract and say, okay, we've done this pro forma, but if it turns out through the audit I would think their good attorneys would tell them right into that contract that, hey, you're not going to get any more than 60%. And if it turns out that you're making more than that, then we're going to require you to give it back to the tenants. And they can write that in. And I would hope they would do that.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gates. We'll call up, would you like the resource witness? Okay. We'll let you reserve the right to close. At this time, we're going to call up a resource witness with TEA. Deputy Commissioner of Finance, Chair calls Mike Meyer. Hello.
Afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members. I'm Mike Meyer, Deputy Commissioner of Finance at the Texas Education Agency. Here's a resource.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Meyer. Vice Chair Gates, you want to? Representative Tepper or Representative Hayes, you had a question for...
Oh, yes, I did. My question was, how do PFCs affect the school funding formula?
As Vice Chair Gates mentioned, a lot of us aren't familiar with PFCs. I'm one of them. I can tell you that when property is taken off the rolls, then the local collections go down. And as Representative said, the state is going to fill in the gap. So roughly speaking, for every, say, $1 billion of property that comes off the rolls, that's going to be about $8.7 million that the state's going to be making up at the average maintenance and operations tax rate. So the school district budget is not impacted, just to be clear about that, but the cost to the state is where the impact is felt.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Gates.
And like I was saying, I don't think anyone really knows what's coming. Just like you just said, you're not aware of the PFCs having any bearing that you're aware of, are you?
We were asked by the LBB to put together analysis on this, and we weren't able to predict anything about what the impact is because we don't have enough data on how much property is going to be affected and how much is going to be taken off the rolls because of it.
Right. And that in lies part of the problem, because these are deals that already have been signed, and many of these, especially new projects, yeah, they haven't been built, and the kids aren't in there yet going to local school district. And you're kind of expressing, not even the Legislative Budget Board, and that's who on appropriation, that's who we look to tell us what's the coming financial problems. And you're sort of confirming what I thought.
Well, and as I said, just as a frame of reference, for every $1 billion of property value that would be coming off the rolls, that would, at the current average maintenance and operations tax rate, that would be about an $8.7 million state cost. So if it's $100 million, you're looking at, quite a bit more, 866. Did I say 100 billion? If it was 100 billion, you'd be looking at 866 million of cost to the state. But I really don't have enough information to know how much property might be coming off.
Right. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Members, any more questions? Thank you, sir.
Sure thing.
Yes, sir. Okay, Chair calls Elizabeth Mueller. Thank you for being here, Ms. Mueller.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Mueller, and I'm a professor of community and regional planning at the University of Texas at Austin. My main area of expertise is affordable housing policy.
Just for the record, to keep it clear, are you testifying on your behalf or on behalf of an organization?
I'm testifying on behalf of the organization Texas Housers that I'm on the board of, and I'm testifying in favor of the bill. But I just wanted to introduce myself a little bit more. My main area of expertise is affordable housing policy, and my research focuses on the needs and problems experienced by low-income renters. While I'm here to offer my perspective based on my expertise, I'm not representing UT. Instead, I'm here in my capacity as a member of the board of Texas Housers, an organization that works to ensure that low-income Texans have access to safe, decent, stable, and affordable housing. I want to thank the committee, and that was an amazing laying out of the bill. Thank the committee for reviewing this tax incentive program and carefully considering necessary reforms. As I said, I'm speaking in favor of the reforms proposed in HB 3568. The most important thing that this bill does, in my view, is to correctly focus the benefits of the program on those renter households that are currently struggling to afford decent housing. In my graduate seminar on affordable housing, I require my students to familiarize themselves with the ways that we define housing needs and then to use census data to assess the match between the number of renter households at different income levels and the number of rental units that they can afford, assuming that spending 30% of income is affordable to them. In discussing what households can afford, it quickly becomes clear to students that households with the lowest incomes are forced to make trade-offs between paying for housing and paying for food, transportation, childcare, or health care. The precarious balance between these essentials that they struggle to maintain can do long-term harm to them and undermine our collective efforts to improve school outcomes, health outcomes, and many other things. For example, a household with an income of $30,000 per year spending 30% of their gross monthly income on their housing, meaning that their rent and utilities would not exceed $833, would have only $1,600 left for all their other needs. Yet in our 5 largest Texas metropolitan areas, renters with incomes below $30,000 per year often spend more than half of their income for their rent and utilities. In Austin, the situation is worst, with almost 71% of renters earning between $15,000 and $30,000 per year, paying more than half of their income for housing, leaving them with at most $1,250 for everything else. And Dallas and Houston, 54% and 55% of this group pays more than half of their income for housing. This compares to only 43% of households at this income level nationwide. Similarly, for households earning closer to $45,000 per year, the majority in the 6 largest metro areas in our state pay more than 30% of their gross monthly income on their housing costs. A household lucky enough to find a unit where rent and utilities together would equal $1,125 a month, which is roughly 30% of their monthly income, would have only a little more than $2,600 remaining for all other costs. This focus on households with the fewest housing choices and for whom housing costs comprise an unsustainable burden is complemented by provisions in the bill that ensure that family-size units will be included in properties participating in this incentive program, and then ensure that households with much coveted housing vouchers will be able to apply to live there. Finally, the requirement that rents be set to be affordable to households at different income targets is fundamental to ensuring the program works for those needing it. But 2 other parts of the bill are important complements to this realignment of income targeting. These are the measures focused on greater transparency in program operations and in accountability for results. Under the heading of transparency, the provisions of the bill that require that these deals be done within the geographic areas where public entities work, that notice be provided to the entities whose taxes will be foregone, which is amazing that that doesn't happen now, that public hearings are held, that a review of underwriting verifies that foregone taxes are used to achieve these lower rents are all critical. Under the heading of accountability, the provisions of the bill that require routine audits be carried out by the State Housing Agency, that annual reports be submitted to them, and specifying the consequences for failure to comply with the income and rent restrictions in the bill are also critical. In summary, I support these proposed changes and am hopeful that together they will ensure that this tool helps us make progress towards meeting the critical housing needs of Texas's many low-income renters. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mueller. Members, any questions? No questions. Thank you, ma'am. Chair calls Heather Way. Thank you for being here, ma'am.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. My name is Heather Way. I am testifying for this bill, and I'm representing myself. I think this is a very good bill, and it goes a really long way of addressing the 3 issues that have been identified with this bill. And I authored the report that Representative Gates mentioned and that came out several years ago. This bill hits them all in terms of affordability, transparency, and accountability. I really just want to hit upon the ways that this bill is far superior to the PFC reform bill that was up before you last week. So first, in terms of affordability, the things I really want to point out, and Representative Gates did a far better job than I can on these things. But first is just sort of drill down on what the really essential things are, why this bill is so much better and goes so much farther in addressing these widespread abuses that Representative Gates spoke to. One is it requires that assessment that Representative Gates mentioned, that underwriting assessment, to guarantee that there is that minimum level of public benefit. As you heard in the testimony last week, one of the lawyers that represents a lot of these projects, and I've confirmed this as well, that you have a lot of deals where you can have as little as 20-25% of the tax break actually resulting in the public benefit in terms of reduced rent. That's just inadequate. We need that basic guardrail protection in there, and this bill provides it. The other bill does not. Second is the income targeting. This is really, really key. The bill that you heard last week does nothing to reduce the income targeting, the affordability levels on new construction for city and county approved PFCs. For housing authority PFCs, or where there's a board where the majority of the officials are not elected, it has a minimum, small amount, little sort of dribble of affordability. Around 10% is 10% of the units at 60% of the area and median family income. The bill before you today for new construction requires 15% of the units have to be affordable at that 50% AMI level. It's really, really key. This is where the greatest crisis is in our communities. It requires an additional 15% at 60, an additional 15% at 80. So it goes a lot farther in terms of, again, producing those public benefits that are so important with such this precious tool we have in terms of our tax dollars. 3 is that guarantee for serving families with children. When you look at the crisis at those income levels where households are really struggling as families with children, and the market's not responding to that. I thought Representative Gates, I wasn't even aware of that, how few properties are coming online without bedrooms. And so this bill actually requires that some of those affordable units be bedrooms, and the bill you heard last week does not. And then fourth, the bill does provide some, I think, the needed flexibility to work statewide. Representative Hayes, you had asked last week for me to come back to the committee with suggestions, and I worked with Representative Gates in his office on addressing the concern about this issue around AMI levels. So the bill before you today, it bases the income levels. You hear this sort of affordable housing. We talk about AMI, MFI. We sort of geek out on these terms. The area median income in this bill is set by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. That's common across pretty much all of our affordable housing programs are anchored on this AMI level you always hear about from everyone getting up here talking about housing bills. The AMI is based on, it's a regional determination. HUD sets those geographic areas. Dallas, it's the Dallas metro area. Austin, it includes Williamson County and some of the sort of surrounding suburban areas. Houston, there's AMIs for rural areas. So the bill follows what's sort of the norm in most affordable housing programs, is that AMI is based on that HUD level for the area, the region. But for areas where the incomes are lower, and where it's much harder to get it at 50% or 60% AMI because just the jobs pay less in those areas, mainly are more rural areas and areas along the border. In that case, you can use the greater of either the AMI or the statewide MFI, the median family income, which for the state of Texas for a family of 4 is $85,000. In contrast, San Antonio metro area AMI is actually $84,000. So San Antonio is sort of like the benchmark for the median income in the state. This is something the state has already done in at least one of this. I was perusing through the code in at least one of its other programs as a benchmark. And so hopefully, Representative Hayes, that gets to your sort of question and concern you raised. Is I think it does a good job of making this tool work statewide. I also, just the last thing I do want to mention on the pilots is how important this is to get rid of them, because I've seen in my study of this the perverse incentives that having a payment and fee in lieu of does. So all the taxes are exempted. There's no taxes being paid, but what happens with the payment in lieu of it is is that annual cash payment that's getting made to reimburse the jurisdiction, whoever approves it. They get their share of the taxes back. And the problem is it becomes, I mentioned this last week, it ends up being a race to the bottom. So what happens is you can have a city that has a really strong, robust program with really strong affordability requirements, but a developer can then shop around and sort of whoever they can offer the most money to, the county, the housing authority. And so you end up with these jurisdictions competing with each other based on who can make the most and require the least amount of affordable housing, and that is really problematic. So eliminating the pilot will really help, and that's unique about this bill. Last few things, accountability. I want to call out the things that are unique about this legislation before you today. The main thing I want to be able to point out is, the bills are actually similar in terms of banning PFCs being able to do deals outside their jurisdiction. This particular bill, though, includes an explicit bar on municipal management districts from participating in those projects because that's where we're seeing the most abuse around the state. So they can't participate in participating in a multifamily residential development. And then on the audit fronts, I think the TDHJ doing the audit is really key. Have a lot of developer friends, but I don't want them guarding the hen house. I want to have an independent audit. That's really important in terms of the standards. The other key thing about the audit in this bill is that it will have that reporting on what is the level of the tax break going towards the reduced rent that will give you the information and tools you need to come along in future years to figure out maybe this needs adjustment. Maybe 60% is not the right level. Maybe there needs to be some fine tuning. The last thing, transparency. The reporting requirements are really, there's a big distinction here to call out. Unlike the bill that you heard last week, this bill would cover current PFC projects as well. So current PFCs would have to report to the state of Texas all the deals they have, to give you all the information, to give TEA the information that we need to determine what is the impact. We don't know. It took me and students an entire year when I created the report that we released to through open records request to track down where all the deals done, and even then we didn't have a sense of where they've been done. And so aside from just applying to future deals, we really need to know how many of these projects are, what's the tax impact, and what do they look like in terms of the public benefits and otherwise. So those are just the key things. There's other things in here, but for me, those are the things that stand out that make this a far, far superior piece of legislation. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Professor Wade. Vice Chair Gates.
One question. The committee substitute, the original bill was 15% at the different AMI levels. And I think the committee substitute is changing at the 12%.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. Getting numbers mixed up. Thank you. Yes. It's 12 at 50, 12 at 60, and 12 at 80. My apologize.
And then,
apologies.
Or you can do a lower amount at 80% of AMI, but 10% as low as 30%.
Thank you for pointing that out, too, which I think is a really big benefit, too, because it gives a flexibility. And so for some jurisdictions where you really want to prioritize the hardest, the House folks who are really, really struggling, and that's where there is really no market rate units. That's and so that's a huge benefit too. Yeah, and that your bill's really unique in providing that option. So, and my apologies for getting the numbers wrong on the 15%.
Members, any more questions? Professor, as a member of the University of Texas community, as a professor of the law school, did you watch the basketball game? Almost final.
I was actually working on this legislation. I really was, but I ran in for the end, and yes. But I am here in my personal capacity. I do want to emphasize that as well. I'm not here in my capacity professor, but yes, I'm so sorry for the horns. That was tough. Yeah, but a great season.
Yes,
we should be proud.
You got it, members. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chair calls members. We have four more witness members. Chair calls Adam Harden.
Mr. Chairman, he had to leave.
Okay.
Just wishes to be shown as he registered and paid.
Yes, sir. We'll do that, sir. We'll let the record reflect that Adam Harden supports the bill, just not wishing to testify. Chair calls Scott Hasselmeyer. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, my name is Scott Hazelmeyer. I'm the county treasurer in Williamson County. I'm appearing today in support of the bill on behalf of Williamson County, also on my own behalf as a taxpayer in Williamson County and in Jarrell ISD. I want to thank, and I guess I'll say I have not seen the committee substitute. However, the most important provision to Williamson County is the Section 1 that has the jurisdictional restrictions. My understanding is that's still part of the bill. And I want to thank you, Vice Chairman, for your work on the issue and your advocacy to establish accountability and transparency regarding these PFCs. We've got several other Republicans and representatives and senators working with us on these reforms. Unfortunately, a vaguely worded statute has created a tax loophole the size of this Capitol complex through which developers are significantly increasing their profitability on these multifamily developments with little or no actual benefit to the families that they're supposed to help. Many of the focus in these hearings has been on events happening in the Houston area. We heard some about the Dallas area today. What I'm here to tell you about is what's happening right up the road in Williamson County. You heard about a lack of accountability. You heard about these pilot payments. What I'm here to tell you is it gets worse. As some of you know, the Texas Essential Housing PFC owns multifamily projects throughout the state. This PFC has land or projects in Travis, Williamson, Hayes, Bexar, and Harris counties. The Texas Essential Housing PFC is sponsored by the SH-130 MMD number 1, which comprises about 2,300 acres in East Travis County around Decker Lake. At the time of his formation was owned by 2 developers. Only one of this PFC's current projects lies within the physical boundaries of its sponsor. And to my knowledge, that site is, as of today, still undeveloped. Nearly 100% of the income of this PFC and its sponsoring MMD comes from developer payments, where we're talking about these pilot payments. Those are related to securing tax exemptions in jurisdictions well outside the boundary of the MMD. At least 5 of this PFC's projects were purchased from and then leased back to entities associated directly with current or former board members of the MMD. 2 of these projects are located in Williamson County. There's one in Georgetown and there's one in Jarrell. I want to tell you specifically about the one located in Jarrell that I drive by every morning on my way into the office of the Williamson County Courthouse. Most of these projects you've heard of are in big metro areas, Houston, San Antonio, Dallas, et cetera. What you need to know is that the small communities are not immune. And small school districts are going to be hurt exponentially more by the sudden appearance of PFC projects in their area. What you have and potentially are going to have is small districts like these MMDs, and you're going to have developers shopping around to these MMDs for pilot payments regarding projects that are well outside the boundaries of the MMD and in areas that never know these projects are coming. In Jarrell, the Texas Essential Housing PSC purchased 15 acres from a related developer in April of 2022. The site is directly across the street from Jarrell High School. Jarrell is one of the fastest growing school districts in Central Texas and in the state of Texas. 10 years ago, there were just over 1,000 students in the school district. Enrollment is now over 3,300. The district grew by 25% last fiscal year alone. I don't need to tell you about the immense challenges this puts on small districts when they experience growth of this magnitude. In that case, every single tax dollar is vital. The same applies on the city level. We're keeping up with water, wastewater, and street infrastructure is an insurmountable task in a city that's growing as fast as Jarrell. The PFC apartment developer in Jarrell secured entitlements for what will only be the second apartment development in the city, and by far the largest. In fact, this development complex required the local ESD to purchase a new fire truck because they didn't have a ladder truck that would reach a 3-story residential building because there wasn't one in the city of Jarrell. Problem is that nobody in town knew the developer planned to take the project off the tax rolls. When I started going around and talking to the elected officials on city council and in the school board within the last month, first they'd heard of the fact that this new apartment complex that started construction a few weeks ago wasn't going to be on the tax rolls. After securing the entitlements, the property was sold to the Texas Essential Housing PFC in the same day, leased back to the developer for 99 years. PFC then filed with the local appraisal district for a tax exemption, and construction on the apartment complex started just a few weeks ago. As Vice Chairman Gates mentioned, when I drive by, I see several $100,000 of pipe laying on the ground on which I'm assuming no sales tax has been paid. We don't know yet exactly how much this complex would pay in property taxes without an exemption. Conservative estimates is that the tax bill would be around $1 million a year. It's probably going to be more than that given the size of the complex. That would have them paying over $500,000 a year in taxes to Jarrell ISD. In this year's budget, that would be over 1% of the entire budget of the school district. As the law currently stands, this tax revenue is never going to be received. But the kids in this apartment complex and throughout Jarrell ISD still have to be educated. The street in front of the apartment still has to be paved, wastewater still has to be taken away and treated, and the residents of the apartments probably will appreciate police and fire service. This developer won't be paying for any of those services. The other taxpayers of Jarrell and Williamson County, and as you've discussed, ultimately the state of Texas will be. And where does the money go? As we've heard in testimony last week and this week, the bulk of these tax savings go to the developer, who really incurs no costs at all in return. The current statute has no rent control requirements and essentially no affordability requirements. I believe the AMI in Williamson County is about $96,000. Virtually any apartment complex in that area could apply or could meet the requirements without much revenue loss at all, and under the current statute, absolutely no oversight. The rest of the tax savings, what we've called this pilot payment, and percentages vary, is returned to the PFC, which then passes it along to a sponsoring entity, in the case of Jarrell, to the SH-130 MMD. The budgeted income for that MMD last fiscal year in 2022 was about $500,000. If you go on their website right now and you look at the budget that they passed this fall, the FY 2023 budget projects income over $30 million. Virtually every dollar of that is derived from payments from developers for securing property and sales tax exemptions. Put short, it's all taxpayer money. And where's that money going? It's going to seed development in that MMD, and it's going to a lot of other expenses. If you look at the minutes from this MMD in the fall, they entered into contracts paying over $50,000 a month to lobbyists. In short, if you think that this is a Houston or a big city problem, it isn't. Without some sort of regulation, this is going to start happening in small towns all across the state. We believe Section 1 of the bill is going to resolve this matter, but it's imperative that the body step forward and prevent local districts from sponsoring PFC projects outside their district. If that doesn't happen this session, then the cat's been let out of the bag, and this structure is going to be repeated all over the state by small districts that see an opportunity to make immense profit. So I have two requests and suggestions for the committee and for the body as a whole. And my first is, please don't get lost in the weeds. We've seen a lot of differences in different bills, and it is very important that we have stricter affordable housing requirements and we have some level of accountability added to the PFC system. This bill obviously would accomplish that. My concern is that those that are currently taking advantage of this loophole are going to try to use differences in bills to distract the body and kill the whole thing altogether, and make sure that nothing is passed and that the jurisdictional restriction doesn't get through along with it. My second request is of a more technical nature, and in addition to my service as county treasurer, I'm also a real estate attorney. And when I look at the bill from a real estate attorney standpoint, I'm concerned that it doesn't sufficiently address current properties owned outside of the jurisdiction of sponsors. I would hope for hopefully some improved language that would clarify that those exemptions, once they become ineligible, end at the end of this tax year. This MMD is going to get that $30 million. I don't think there's anything this body can do to stop it. But what we need to do is we need to stop the bleeding after that. We need to make sure that that's done specifically. And we need to get those properties back on the tax rolls before they start affecting these school districts, before they start affecting the formula, and before the state has to start picking up the tab. I appreciate the committee's time today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I've got a question on the, so in this development that you drive by every day, it was vacant land?
It was.
Okay, so there was essentially no property tax. You know, it was probably ag exempt or I don't know where it is honestly, but it wasn't generating a significant amount of revenue for the school district, the county, or the city.
I agree with that. Okay. I'll also say it's across the street from the high school, neighboring an existing building out residential development.
Okay.
So if you look on all sides of this development, other development is coming. It is the prime property.
So what you're saying
in the middle of Jarrell.
What you're saying then is a development would have come there regardless of this program.
In fact,
but it would have come without the program, so they would have been paying taxes. Okay,
exactly.
So you think, and that's my question is, this program is, it has provided many families with lower than market rent, and would Vice Chair Gates' bill or Representative Jatan's bill, would they eliminate it, or would it hamper that investment to the point where they're saying, you know what, it's not worth our time or investment? And that's a question, I guess, you know, just a general question.
And I think it's a valid question, and it's a valid question in certain areas. What I'll point out about, let me point out 2 projects in Williamson County. Jarrell is a community of starter homes. The other apartment complex in town is not a high rent apartment complex, very fast growing. There are not the primary jobs immediately adjacent to this project that you would expect in what would be an affordable housing project. Anybody living there is going to be commuting a significant distance to get to wherever this workforce housing is serving. So there are opportunities, and I think there would be opportunities for an affordable housing project under the standards that would be implemented by Vice Chairman Gates's bill. I don't think it would be in that particular spot. In Georgetown, the as yet undeveloped spot owned by this PFC is in the middle of Wolf Ranch, which was the significant commercial and retail development, and immediately next door to the brand new HEB that was just built. It is the prime commercial location in Georgetown. Was designated for a multifamily development, and a multifamily development would likely be built there on the tax rolls because one would be viable in that particular area.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Gates.
You had a question about the, under my bill, a management district is, this committee substitute explicitly bars management districts from doing the deals. But even under the other version, whoever is to sponsor has to do it within their geographic range. So the city of Houston couldn't go beyond their city boundaries.
Right.
And so it's specifically designed to address that abuse that you described.
And I suppose my question from a legislative intent standpoint is the intention on the 8 or 9 projects that, for example, this particular MMD owns and operates currently that are outside of its boundaries, is would the exemption end on those projects going forward?
No, and that's going to have to be, I don't know if that's even possible, and that's no part, you know, that's something to discuss later to see how to rein in the abuses that are out there. But that isn't what this bill can't really deal with that at this time.
Okay, and I will say that is vital to us. You know, for us to be supporting a bill, it's vital that those in. And there's 2 different scenarios. Well, actually 3. There's existing apartment complexes like the Cheatham Street Flats and San Marcos, which were an ongoing apartment complex, relatively new, which was paying taxes in San Marcos and in Hays County, and then was purchased by this PFC and taken off the tax rolls. There is the project in Jarrell, which is currently under construction. And then there is, for example, the property in Georgetown, which currently is vacant land. And so I think you have 3 different levels of where the exemption currently stands. And I think it would be vital at some point. I think it's easy on vacant land if you're not going and building, if you're going to go build future improvements. But those others, in my opinion, are profitable developments without the tax exemption. I'm not saying go back retroactively and collect the taxes they haven't paid, but that exemption for an entity that's well outside of its jurisdictional boundary, in our opinion, needs to end.
Yeah, well, this bill does stop that as far as it related to PFCs.
Okay.
Representative Bernal?
Quick, I appreciate the commentary on the taking things off of the tax rolls, and certainly understand a jurisdiction from one area doing business somewhere else. My primary concern always is, and we've talked about this quite a bit, is the benefit that the developer getting, or that the PFC is getting, are the benefits that they're getting worth what we're getting in affordable housing? And I think that's my question about the examples you gave. Is I understand all the tax implications,
sure,
but are they building affordable housing? Are they building housing for people who otherwise would not be able to afford to live there, or are they not? That's sort of my question to the examples you gave, because that's always been my primary concern. Is
sure. And
by the way, I agree that in most places 80% AMI is not that.
Yeah.
Right. I just don't believe that it is. So that's my question. Do we know what the affordability ratios are in those developments?
Sure. Oh, and I don't. I would hope that you have the opportunity to ask that question. And the shining example I would see would be the complex in San Marcos that was open, running, collecting rents, then was purchased.
Right.
What I would say is this bill does 2 things. It establishes those standards to ensure that we are providing affordability.
Sure.
And it stops this operating outside of your jurisdiction deal, which
sure. And I'm sensitive to both, and I care about what happens to the way I see it is, if you're going to keep money from going into the public education pot, are we getting the requisite value out of that? And the value is supposed to be that you're creating housing that's affordable for people to live in who cannot otherwise afford to live there.
Agreed.
I just think that's the one standard that's the whole point of the program, right? Is that so?
And I don't think under the current statute that's really a factor at all.
8 times out of 10, I'd agree with you that it's not. We're not hammering it home the way we're supposed to.
And to clarify that, I think there's some very legitimate PFC multifamily development projects being undertaken by housing authorities in their own, particularly community. I know there have been abuses that we heard about last week, et cetera, in Houston and other places, but that doesn't mean there aren't legitimate projects going on.
Again, I think this is more of a weed out situation, not a burn it all to the ground situation.
Correct.
Right. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Let me follow up real quick on what I asked earlier. I kind of didn't circle the loop on that, but so with Williamson County, where you are as a treasurer, y'all offer tax abatements and tax incentives to bring businesses and industry, or do you think that some of those would have come without those tax abatements?
Some, I'm sure. Would some not come? I'm sure. I think the important thing is the local jurisdiction made those decisions.
That specific Williamson County?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Somebody else outside the jurisdiction wasn't making those decisions for us.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Members, any more questions? Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, members, we have 2 more witnesses. Chair calls Walter Moreau. Thank you for being here, sir.
I'm Walter Moreau, the Director at Foundation Communities, speaking for the organization and in favor of Representative Gates' bill. I think you've heard enough already to get the sense this loophole with the PFCs is, in most cases, a ripoff. You're getting pennies on the dollar for affordability. Our organization, we mostly serve families below 50% of median, some at below 60, and the need is huge. Thousands of families on a wait list. We're just finishing construction of our Loretta apartments, 137 units. We have 2,000 people on the wait list, below 60% of median with no marketing. That's really across Texas where the critical need is. And I think this bill dives deeper into the affordability. I agree with the last speaker. You can get lost in the weeds, all the things this bill does, but the real reform, and you know this, follow the money. If you really want to curb the abuses, you've got to follow the money and cut back on and deepen the affordability. And this bill tries to achieve that.
Could I ask you, the development you just spoke about that y'all are doing, does that have 2 bedrooms?
It's mostly 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom.
Okay.
In 1997, the legislature, the bill went through that it gave 100% property exemption to apartments if they were owned by CHODOs, Community Housing Development Organizations. No affordability requirement, but it only impacted Foundation Communities, Habitat for Humanity, mission-driven nonprofits. Well, within 6 years, there were CHODOs all over Texas. Billions of dollars in properties rolled off the tax rolls. The legislature had to close down that loophole. What ultimately closed it down was not a repeal, but it was cutting the exemption from 100% to 50% and some deeper affordability. My opinion, I wish the bill went even further and follow the money if you want to really reform this thing. Another option, this is not in the bill, but maybe school districts should have a vote on these deals. I think there is a direct impact on school districts through the interest and the sinking fund, the piece that isn't picked up in the Robin Hood formula. So there is a real impact on the schools when they go to build and operate and maintain their buildings. That's all I've got to say. I think it's essential to follow the money and get this right this session, because if the legislature doesn't, you're going to see huge additional abuse of this loophole, billions and billions coming off the tax rolls. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. Members, any questions? Thank you, sir. And final witness on this bill is Wayne Dolcefino. Thank you for being here, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
My name is Wayne Dolcefino. I'm a former TV investigative reporter, and now I run an investigative media firm in Houston for the last 10 years.
And are you testifying?
I'm testifying on behalf of myself.
Okay.
No one's paying me to be here. I'm just having fun.
And are you for, against, or on the bill?
So I am for fixing this. I'm going to let you guys. You're the guys that need to fix it, but somebody's got to fix this.
Just for the record, we show you as neutral.
I'm neutral on a particular bill. Obviously, I like a lot of things in Representative Gates' bill.
So it's okay to leave you as neutral.
Sure.
For the record, okay.
Sure, because what I kind of want to do today, in the few minutes I want to take, is to sort of educate you on the rogue actor. The big rogue actor here. And I know the Williamson County Treasurer was talking about a couple of apartment complexes. I want to talk to you about the Houston Housing Authority, which I've been investigating and exposing for 3 years. First of all, central to this is when housing authorities were created by the legislature, they were created for public housing. At a time, we just put a bunch of poor people in a building. But it was specifically designed not to compete with the private sector. It's in the statute, right? The housing authority, especially in Houston, has gone into the real estate business, offering now free taxes to your apartment over here, and you've got an apartment 2 blocks away, and you don't get it, yet you're basically offering the same rents. The Houston Housing Authority has denied us for 3 years the right to see the rent rolls of these apartments prior to the acquisitions, right? As Heather Way told you last week, 2/3 of apartments are already renting at 80% AMI, right? So what did you charge for rent before you came to us, worked out this deal, and then get your taxes taken off? What if it was the same number? What if the rents you were actually charging people didn't change? And that's what's happened in Houston. And I know it's happened. We've proven it. People got this $1 million tax gift and didn't actually have to lower the rents that they were already charging. You've got a procurement process in Houston, the Housing Authority, which is fundamentally flawed. And Representative Tepper, you asked a question about, who knew about this, what the city does, something does the county know. The Houston Housing Authority are all appointed people, all appointed by one person, the mayor. Not even city council gets to play in that thing. The Housing Authority, because of the state statute, has the authority to go outside the city limits and do these deals out there. So they're doing them in Katy and they're doing them in Spring. And the people who live there, the school districts out there, the mud districts out there, because there are a lot of them, they got no say. They don't even get to vote for the mayor, forgetting whether or not there is not a single elected official, not one, in the entire process. They don't have to notify the county, the city, or the school district. God forbid they actually get to vote on it, which I think is fundamentally needs to happen. Elected people need to give away tax money. I'm personally not comfortable, just as a guy who's investigated government stuff for 40 years, with appointed people doing it. So let's talk about the process. And maybe this will help guide you, because I think knowing what's going on will help you. So you go to you get these deals, and I call the Housing Authority a real estate racket, bait and switch, and shell game. Now think of those three terms, and I know they sound like TV terms, but I'm going to exactly tell you why it's true, okay? So we've given away $74 million, according to their own testimony, $74 million in taxes. And I didn't do very well at UT when I was in math, but I know that we've already given away $5.5 billion in future taxes. The Housing Authority was trying to do 51 more of these deals. So I'll let you think about the math. Here's what they do. They'll come, and this is all sort of done in secrecy, but they'll have a meeting and they'll say, we're going to do a deal with Representative Gates Corporation, and it's going to have 50%, right, folks who are affordable.
Might not be a good example. Let's use
Okay, let's use someone else.
Bobby. Just say Bobby.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. So we're going to do 20% of those apartments are going to be for the 60% AMI folks, right? The folks who are more necessarily needy, right? And the deal is going to be with Corporation A. Then they'll come back a few months later, without referring back to that original deal, and say, okay, we're going to go forward with a deal with Corporation B, right? And all of a sudden, the 60% people have magically disappeared, okay? That's what I mean by bait and switch, okay? And they never tell anyone that this is part of the original deal. Not only do they go to Corporation B, but the Houston Housing Authority likes to do a lot of deals with Delaware corporations, okay? That's insane. We're giving away property tax money to corporations where we can't find out who's in those corporations. I could guess, and it would probably be a good guess, but we don't know. That's what they're doing, okay? Now, the last time you hear from them will be to say, okay, we're going to have one of our people go finish this deal with Corporation B. They never even bring back the final deal. They don't even let you see the development agreements. They fight to keep the development agreements secret. So wait a second. We just had some appointed people give away $1 million in tax money and not even show us the deal they're voting on. I am getting records now that I've asked for 3 years. So we were the ones that actually went to the appraiser this year in Harris County, nice guy, and said, you know, the statute says that you're supposed to actually, at least, you have the power to look at these things, right? If you came to my house and you found me cheating on my taxes, and between my company and my house, I pay about $45,000 a year in property taxes. If you came to my house and found me cheating, you would come after me for the year I cheated, at the very least. And so one of my frustrations, and I know you can't get everything you want, is I don't like the concept of catching someone cheating and then say, as long as you stop cheating me in the next 120 days, then I'm cool, right? This is nonsense. This is fake affordable housing. Most of the deals in Houston are just fake affordable housing. They're essentially replacing the people that were already workforce housing. That's what they're doing, and they're getting away with it. I will tell you that the political influence, at least in Houston, is shameful. The former chairman of the Housing Authority and the wife of a county commissioner have made $6 million. And I wanted to get up last week when the Lock Lord people were here, and they're lovely people. But, you know, the Texans for Workforce Housing, they've been paid $11 million on these deals just in Houston. This is I'll give you another phrase, it's a gravy train. Now, if we really want to help affordable housing, needy families, then let's cut the nonsense, right? Eliminate all that stuff, because they don't need a tax break for that. Let's really put needy families and people that really need help. And so, sure, it won't be quite as good of a deal, and I think that's what Representative Gates' bill was trying to get to, is, look, this is a lot to give away. I mean, it's like a lot. It's like $2 billion to HISD, right? Plus the school districts who aren't even in the city, that had nothing to do with electing our mayor or the housing authority, that just took their taxes away. I would suggest that everybody has to approve this, right? What about a mud district? There's a mud district, I understand, up in Cypress, that a couple of these deals wiped out 20% of their tax base. I mean, this is like, no offense to everybody who created this, this is ridiculous. And I'm not against development. I'm not against people making money. And there should be some profit in this business. But this was really about charities, true nonprofits. You know what else the Housing Authority does? They get a kickback of the sales tax, okay? I have emails, and Representative Gates has seen it, right? Where the developers are actually complaining about how much money the Housing Authority wants back as a sales tax kickback. So what they do is they create this PFC, then the PFC claims it's getting all the construction materials, but they're actually master leasing the entire construction to a for-profit company, right? So they got the benefit of the sales tax exemption. And then they go to the developer, well, for getting that cut, we want 25% of it back. Now, look, you know, that's a mob thing to me. I mean, what is that? And they're stealing other people's sales tax money. That's not even their sales tax money. It's the city of Houston. It's the county. The reason I'm so animated about this is because I've been doing this for a long time, investigating government stuff. This one's a doozy. And this one needs to stop. And if we can't fix it, we ought to dump the whole thing. Personally, that's what I think. And say, wait a second. Once we let the door open, and look, I don't really blame the developers, because, like, if you're dealing with either stupid people or crooked people, you get away with a lot of stuff. I don't blame them, right? But it's a bad deal for taxpayers. And the secrecy in the Housing Authority about not even telling you what the deal is, you wouldn't operate that way on this committee. You wouldn't just go back and say, hey, look, Bob, go finalize that $100 million apartment deal and not bring it back so that the taxpayers can see a vote. it is out of control. And I know there are bad actors, and it's unfortunate that you have bad actors. But at the end of the day, whether you go with Representative Gates' bill, which I think has a lot of really great stuff in it, or you go with the other bill, please do something, because this really is an insane abuse of public trust. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Tepper.
Mr. Delfino, you're an investigative reporter. You've filed open records requests on these situations?
I have. Most of them were denied. And I'm getting records now that I asked for 3.5 years ago.
But you've complained, I assume you've complained to the Attorney General's office, and what happens then?
Representative Tepper, I've dealt with the Attorney General a lot. His administration has not been very helpful. And when the Attorney General rules, the exceptions in the Act, I'm not trying to change the subject, but the exceptions in the Act are another big railroad, okay? Because you could just claim litigation now, somebody's suing you for something, and you can withhold all your records. They claim that that records will reveal a disadvantage or an advantage to another purchaser. So if I do a deal 1, right? And I want to see those records, and they're already at deal 10. They will argue that if they let me know about any of these deals, any of them, it could jeopardize their negotiating position with the next one. It's an exception you can use under the Act. It's a dumb exception, but it is one you could use. And so they systematically withhold these records under the Open Records Act. And they get away with it because the Open Records Act, and is a piece of junk now because there's so many exceptions that allow government to hide things. But government could choose to be transparent or not, right? The Housing Authority chooses to withhold these records. And I say every deal is different, right? If I do a deal in the Heights in Houston, that's a certain set of circumstances.
When you submit the open records request, do you go to the city secretary?
No. The Houston Housing Authority is a separate entity. The mayor has claimed for 3.5 years that it's independent and he can't control it, which of course is not true, but it's a separate entity. So you have to go to them to ask for the records. The chairman just testified about 2 weeks ago and said we created, the word created, 12,500 new affordable apartments, and 39% of them were for the folks at 60%. Okay, and I, as a guy who's looked at every project and the rent rolls, that can't be true. And so we figured out that what he did was actually represent what the deals were originally, right, before they changed, right? So and we asked for the records, and they're still fighting us on some of those records. That's part of the problem, and why I like the idea that the state folks get in the business of auditing. After the appraiser looked at and asked everyone to turn in their little form saying, I promise I'm being good about affordable housing, he was done, right? And I said to him, I've looked at those rent rolls that were provided, and a lot of these places aren't doing 50%. And one of the reasons is because they don't advertise. I think they should be required to advertise. If you're getting a tax break to provide affordable housing, you should be forced to provide on your website, hey, workforce folks, nurses, whoever, we've got affordable housing. They don't do that. And the reason they don't do that is because they don't want to tell the other folks that other folks are paying cheaper rent. I mean, we have to all be honest about what's going on here. I mean, I can't tell you how bad and how wrong this is. And I know I don't want to squish the gravy train for a few folks, but it's really time that, and I know you guys can do it, and you can figure out the distinctions and the differences. I'm not here for developers. I'm just a guy who investigates taxpayer money, and I think this is insane.
Members, any more questions? Thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it. Okay, members, is there anyone else wishing to testify on, for, against House Bill 3568? Hearing none, the chair recognizes Vice Chair Gates to close.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be doing because it was sort of asked, a comparison of the bill from last week and our bill. But the biggest thing, especially for the members if there are people from industry that come knocking on your door and they're pushing one bill over the other, ask them, are you okay with putting in legislation that there's a minimum of 60% has to be given to the benefit of the tenants? And listen to what they tell you. And then say, well, if you won't agree to 60, what will you agree to? And I can tell you that there's going to be resistance to ever commit to a minimum. The other thing is ask them, how do you feel doing away with the payment in lieu of taxes? And they are going to fight you tooth and nail and not doing away with that, because as it was demonstrated, when they can offer that to various taxing entities, they began competing with each other to not require a bunch of money going to the tenants, because they become more concerned with what they're getting. So I think those two things are probably some of the biggest differences between this bill and the one you heard last week. But those make common sense things in trying to help, I think, rein in a lot of the abuses. And the reason they won't ever put that in the other bill is because that bill was written by industry. And just those two things alone will tell you why this bill is so dramatically different. But hey, I appreciate your indulgence, and thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gates. Members, any questions? Okay. With that, the Chair will withdraw the committee substitute to House Bill 4073 and leave it pending at this time. Members, last bill. I'm going to lay out and explain my bill relating to fire certificates of the Texas Fire Protection Commission. The Chair lays out House Bill 4073. The Texas Commission on Fire Protection has identified a challenge in hiring new firefighters to meet the demand for service delivery in various parts of Texas. Many departments are struggling to attract enough certified applicants, and Chapter 419 of the Government Code is one factor. This code limits individual firefighters to a one-year late certification renewal period, which can be an obstacle to those who have retired or resigned from their fire service career and wish to re-enter the workforce with a different department. So individuals who have allowed their certification to expire for longer than 1 year must currently retake the written exam and complete skills testing before renewing their certification. To address this challenge, members, this bill would allow the agency to adopt rules outlining a process for certification renewal for a period not exceeding 5 years without requiring reexamination. This would provide an opportunity for previously certified or qualified individuals to seek employment as a firefighter again. Members, we have three witnesses. So unless there are any questions, members, I'm going to go ahead and proceed. The Chair calls Lori Christensen. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me. My name is Lori Christensen. I'm the Fire Marshal for Harris County. I've come to urge your favorable consideration for House Bill 4073 regarding the renewal of certifications. Obviously, as you've already stated, it's this 419.0341 establishes the duration for which licensing occurs. This would help an office such as mine, who oversees fire and life safety inspections, fire investigations, hazardous materials responses, whether it's on roadways or in buildings. And this will help us because what we are seeing throughout the state is an extremely low amount of applicants. And what we are finding, though, is those that have retired are looking to come back into service. Therefore, we see where re-entering the workforce, it would lift those barriers if this were to be passed. It opens the door to what I consider the next generation of our workforce and allows them to train that generation and hopefully open up more opportunities and excitement for that. So I want to thank you in advance for your full support of House Bill 4073, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today. Any questions, sir?
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Chair calls Jay Mallinger. Thank you for your patience and for being here, sir.
You're welcome. My name is James Malliner, and I represent Texas Fire Chiefs Association. I currently serve as the Vice President of the Texas Fire Chiefs. We're in full support of this bill, and I'm just here if you have any questions.
Okay. Members, any questions? No questions. Thank you for your support. Yes, sir. And members, final witness, Chair calls Michael Glenn. Thank you, sir, for your patience as well.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair Gates. My name is Michael Glenn. I'm the president of the Fort Worth Firefighters Association, IAFF Local 440, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the bill in support of it.
Okay. Members, any questions?
I know.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I was one of the ones that brought this forward to the Texas Commission on Fire Protection, to Chief Wisco. I've got a retiree. He's a 31-year veteran of the Fort Worth Fire Department. He retired as a deputy chief. So what does that mean? That means he studied for 90-plus days, and likely many more months than that, to promote to the rank of driver or engineer. And then he served in that role for at least 2 more years. And then he promoted to lieutenant, did the same thing, promoted to captain, made battalion chief. And then he was appointed as a deputy chief. And the point is that over the course of his career, he studied, he learned, he became better educated, he had a vast amount of experience. He was trusted to be one of our safety officers, meaning he was one of the ones outside with the sole focus to make sure that we all went home, if possible. He was a shift commander, and now that he is, meaning he was over 240 plus firefighters that were on duty during the course of a shift. It was an incredible role, incredible amount of responsibility that Deputy Chief Mike Henderson had, except now he's retired. He's more than a year out since retirement, and so his certification has lapsed, and under the current rule, he can't renew it. And he lives out in a more rural area where they need volunteer firefighters because it can't support a municipal fire department. Except now he's not certified. And so there are volunteer firefighters, and bless their hearts for what they're doing out in that area, but he doesn't have the certifications. They actually have more certifications than he does. So this will allow him to renew his certification once the TCFP, the commission, creates the rules so that he could once again become a certified firefighter. This is an important process, I believe, also what we're undertaking right here, because the Fort Worth Fire Department normally takes applications of about 2,000 applicants from Fort Worth and across the state of Texas, and some across the nation. 2,000, 2,500 is not an unusual number for us. This last cycle, we just gave a test a few weeks ago, but this last cycle, there was 1,951 applicants, and there was only 963, I believe it was, that showed up for the test. And when we look at the number that normally will pass the test, our numbers are much lower. Our candidate pool is much lower. And now the one thing I would say in closing, I am 100% in support of this bill. I think it's the right thing to do. Chairman Lozano, I appreciate you listening to Chief Wisco and being willing to bring this forward. I applaud you, and I'm thankful on behalf of the firefighters for you doing that. But as we consider this bill, and as you consider other bills now and in your future, let's not forget firefighting is not a young man's game. This is not intended for us to have a bunch of firefighters working a second career so that we have 55, 60, 65-year-old firefighters riding on fire trucks. Firefighting is a tough job, it's a demanding job, and the citizens that we protect deserve the very best. And they need to make sure that we have firefighters, and it's why we've got to have retirement systems in place so that firefighters do not have to, we don't have to staff fire trucks with 60, 65-year-old firefighters across all the rigs. So I just want to make that point. It's a young man's game. It's a tough job, but this is an important bill, and I appreciate your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Members, any questions? No, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for your patience.
Yes, sir. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on for or against House Bill 4073? Hearing none. Members, unless there are any questions, I close. And with that, the The chair withdraws House Bill 4073 and will leave it pending at this time. Members, if there is no further business, the chair moves to adjourn. Any objection to the House Committee on Urban Affairs? Hearing none, the Committee on Urban Affairs stands adjourned until subject to call of the chair.